responses. And one of the ways, and actually, let me just tell you, you're much greater risk for developing multiple sclerosis or having an exacerbation of an autoimmune condition like lupus when your natural killer cell levels are low. That's interesting, isn't it? Okay, now this could be part of the reason why. You see, natural killer cells will release something. This is actually, I guess this would be considered a cytokine, but it's not an inflammatory cytokine. It's a chemical messenger that it sends out. It's called resolvin E1. Resolvin E1. And what this does is this communicates with various parts of the immune system. And what do you think resolvin does? Just think about the word resolvin. It resolves issues with the immune system fighting, right? It's like your negotiator that comes in and your peacemaker, comes in and he says, okay, no more fighting. It's resolved, right? Let's resolve these differences. Well, that's what the natural killer cell can do. It's amazing how many jobs this natural killer cell has. But one of them is to produce this resolvin E1 to prevent potentially overactive responses with the immune system. In particular, this is dealing with allergic airway inflammation when it's discussing why things should be resolved in the airways with the helper T cell and the eosinophil. Remember that's related to allergies? So allergic or asthmatic complications, they're finding now that the natural killer cell can help alleviate those things. Pretty amazing, right? Okay. That was a delightful sound. We just got some oxytocin from that. All right. So look at this. This was amazing. I found this morning, and this is why I wanted to share this with you. Okay? Resolvin D1 and D2 reduce what? SARS-CoV-induced inflammatory response. Now this says in cystic fibrosis macrophages, but they also found this in regular macrophages. You don't just have to have cystic fibrosis to be affected by this. So what does that all mean? Well, let me just read you a little snippet here, what they found. These resolvin compounds demonstrate beneficial regulatory actions on SARS-CoV-2 induced inflammation. In particular, it went on to mention the potential for combating cytokine storm, because cytokine storm is this overactive inflammatory response. So not only can natural killer cells detect viruses that other immune cells cannot find, they can destroy viruses that other immune cells cannot find, they can also resolve overactive immune responses in the lungs, and thus preventing cytokine storm. Isn't that amazing? So who wants to boost their natural killer cell levels? Okay, remember how to do that? Anyone? Let's share a few things that you learned from yesterday. Okay, water, yes, definitely. Walking through pine, those pine needles, remember the pinene that are found in the pine essential oil, basically. Also found in eucalyptus in smaller amounts. But this actually triggers an initiation of an increase in natural killer cell levels and activity. Okay, that's a very good one. What else? Sleep. That's very important. Positive attitude, exactly. A merry heart doeth good like a medicine, but a broken spirit drieth the bones, which is where our immune system resides. Okay, were there any others that you remember?
Relationship with God.
Relationship with God. Why? Because He's the ultimate source of oxytocin, correct? The ultimate source of love. He'll never let us down. Pumpkin seeds. Well, those are helpful in another way, maybe not directly increasing natural killer cell levels, but what do? They help to take care of parasites, correct? And they also can help with prostatic hypertrophy, which is sometimes an issue with men as they get older. So many things. Well, fresh air in your house, definitely. So you all are good students. You know these things. And now the task for us after we leave today, now we're going to go over a lot more things today, and I would not expect you to be able to dictate back to me every single aspect we're going to cover today. But all you have to do is look at the simplicity of it. We're going to talk a lot about things like oranges, and we're going to get down into the nitty-gritty of why that orange is packed with not just nutrients, but medicinal compounds that are powerful. But what do you have to do? Remember all the details and physiology? All you have to remember is, I've got to eat orange today, okay? So this is the simple thing, but I'm going to show you why it's so important, okay? All right, so the excitement about natural killer cells, I'm glad we're keeping that up. And basically the things we cover today are also going to help, at least in a roundabout way, with increasing natural killer cells number and activity as well. But we're going to focus on something a little bit different as we transition into the presentation. And let me actually check here something for a moment. Jamie, we're at 53%. I think we're going to be good for the remainder here. All right. Okay, so here we go. I want to introduce you. Oh, you thought COVID was bad, right? Well, maybe you didn't. But, okay, Ebola, pretty bad, right? You don't want to get Ebola. And there are plenty of people that have succumbed to COVID. It's not as dangerous as, let's say, the original SARS, which had a mortality rate of 10%. What about heart disease? Pretty dangerous, right? Pretty deadly. But this is the number one most deadly condition in the Western world today. Kills more people than anything else. Have you ever heard of it? You haven't heard of this? This is Latin, by the way. Lactillus solanum tuberosum. I'm glad no one here has taken Latin before. Okay, I'm going to show you what this is. Are you ready for this? It's kind of graphic. You ready? Here it is. Lactillus solanum tuberosum is Latin for couch potato. Now, I'm not making this up. This is serious. This is very serious. You see, the Journal of the American Medical Association mentioned back in 2004, and it's still the same today, that modifiable, meaning the things that we can change, behavioral risk factors are the leading causes of mortality in the United States. They're leading causes. Now, we're going to cover natural remedies today, and I don't want to misinform you, because natural remedies are not a cure-all. What is the number one cause of death? Modifiable behavioral risk factors. Okay? So, yes, this is dangerous. And maybe, just maybe, see, my clicker here is not working. Maybe, just maybe, turmeric will make it better a little bit, right? Turmeric, a wonderful herb. We'll talk about it. But what else needs to happen here? It's not enough just to take the natural remedy. Also have to enjoy exercise and fresh air, you know, and all those things that are health promoting, those health promoting activities. Not simply take the turmeric or whatever else it is. My philosophy with natural remedies are that natural remedies are a catalyst to the healing process. What is a catalyst? It's something that accelerates a reaction in chemistry. Now, when we relate that to health, natural remedies are something that accelerates a natural healing process in our own bodies. And it works with our physiology as well. That's why natural remedies often will not, especially when used in moderation, which is important because they're good, but still need to use them in moderation. When they're used in moderation, they can have a tremendously beneficial effect with very little or no side effects, because they work in concert with that healing process that's already taking place. And what triggers the healing process is exercise, right? Fresh air, sunshine, vitamin D, a healthy lifestyle, and also a healthy mentality as well. That same study that describes some of these risk factors included smoking, poor diet, physical inactivity, and alcohol consumption. There are other things as well, though, that we can change. We can change the way we think, right? At least we can try. We can dwell on things that are good. We can look at the positive attributes of our spouse instead of being upset at all the things they do to annoy us, right? All those things are going to be health promoting, and they should be included with these as well. These are the root causes right here, root causes of death and disease and disability. So it's true that herbs are very powerful. I'm a believer in herbs, but they should be used in conjunction with other aspects of a healthy lifestyle to get the full benefit. You understand? Okay. All right, so let's move on with just that little disclaimer. And let's look at diet. Things that we can do. And we're going to focus on this for the remainder of the evening, the afternoon. Because I would classify herbal remedies in food and diet as well. Why? Because it's a food. This orange right here, it may not seem like, that looks a little bit dried out to me now that I see it on this big screen. I like fresh oranges. I don't know about you all. But this orange is actually an herbal remedy right here. Well, fruit remedy. But it's powerful. And you'll see, they've actually done studies on this in COVID-19, believe it or not. And we're going to look into those. Amazing insight on this, by the way. But did you realize that 48% of the U.S. population consumes less than one serving of fruit per day? Less than one serving. Now, let me explain to you what a serving of fruit means utilizing government guidelines. I used to work in public health. I was a public health nurse, and for a time I worked with the WIC program, Women, Infant, and Children Childhood Nutrition Program, and maternal nutrition program. And I would do intakes on pregnant women to find out what their consumption of fresh fruit and vegetables were, because that was just part of the counseling that had to go on. And I will tell you, we would be so happy if they would just say, yeah, we had one banana. You know why? Because we could count that as 2 servings of fruit. Okay? Oh, you had a cup of juice? We didn't even ask what the constituents were, what was contained, if it was 100% fruit juice or 10%. We were just anxious to write down a little tick mark there because it was hard to find people that were eating fruit. So it's surprising. I may be kind of preaching to the choir. You may love fruit. I really enjoy fruit, but some people just don't eat it. Half of the U.S. population consumes less than 1 serving of fruit per day. And that's according to the USDA. Okay, this one's a little bit better, but still there's room for improvement. 51% of the U.S. population consumes less than 3 servings of vegetables per day. So less than 3 servings of vegetables and less than 1 serving of fruit, half the U.S. population. We need to let food be our medicine because there's so much medicinal value in these plants. It is astounding how much medicinal value is in these plants. And we're going to look at some of this. Okay, we looked a little bit at Ebola, the Ebola virus. Yesterday, we talked about how natural killer cells are helpful, according to these studies, in fighting off Ebola virus. Well, there's another aspect of fighting Ebola. You see, when Ebola came around, I was doing a lot of research, and in fact, I'll show you this. You'll find this enlightening. I actually started a school, online learning program called Pre-Ebola, Pandemic Preparedness Course. Why? Because I knew if people just learned a few simple things, it could potentially save their lives. And my whole family got involved. My daughter actually did a video with me. Second to youngest daughter decided she was going to become a model and imitate this lady here. By the way, that's the correct way to wear a face mask. We'll get into any more of that. But yeah, we all got involved with it and we really enjoyed it. But I really did a lot of research on Ebola, and what I found was just so profound. We have research from the 80s, even from the 70s, 80s, and 90s dealing with Ebola, how to potentially naturally destroy it. And none of that came out in the news. So that's why I thought I've got to say something about this, because there are things that we can do. We don't have to just be sitting ducks for these infections. And one of the studies that I found was really eye-opening, and I'm going to share that with you right now. It had to do with a group of mice. What it found was that, and this was published in 2011, Journal of Infectious Diseases, it found that mice who were somehow prompted to have 7 times the average blood levels of a compound known as mannose binding lectin, or MBL for short, mannose binding lectin. So how many times the normal human amount? 7 times, right? Of this mannose binding, we all have it. It floats around, our bodies produce it. 7 times the normal human level. What happened? They survived, quote, fatal Ebola virus infections and became immune to virus rechallenge. They would have normally succumbed to Ebola virus. Yet they were able to resist it with this mannose binding lectin. How many of you want more mannose binding lectin? I do too. Okay, let me read you another study. I actually have a number of studies here citing various aspects of mannose binding lectin. What happens is this lectin, a lectin is something that can adhere itself to, let me get this right, I think it's either proteins or sugars. I can't remember now, one or the other. But whatever it is, these viruses have proteins and sugars surrounding them. They're called glycoproteins. And so these lectins can come along and they can adhere. The mannose, oh yeah, mannose, that's it, mannose binding lectin. It adheres to the sugar because mannose is a sugar. Okay, so it comes along and adheres to the mannose that's on the exterior of the virus. It latches on and it kind of destabilizes the cell. Not the cell, the virus itself. It can inhibit it from going into the cell, kind of like a ball and chain. It attaches a ball and chain, basically, to the virus. And so it can't really move very well. The immune cell sees that ball and chain, and it comes up next to it and destroys it. So there are a lot of really beneficial physiologic effects of these mannose binding lectins. See if I have any more notable things. I think it's suffice it to say that's good. And once again, you want these mannose binding lectins, right? Sounds like a great thing, right? Okay. Now, let me ask you a question. How much would you pay for mannose binding lectin? Would you pay $100,000 if it would save your life? Some people would. Yet, the pharmaceutical manufacturers that looked at all these wonderful effects of mannose binding lectin had this to say. This was the Journal of Biological Chemistry. It said, mannose binding lectin has a complex quaternary structure, meaning it's a very complex molecule, unsuitable for large-scale, cost-effective production. Costs too much, they're not going to invest in that. Not for you and I, okay? Makes you a little sad, right? But don't worry, God has taken care of you already, okay? Because mannose binding lectin can be found in plants. In plants. In fact, there's a study that looked at this mannose binding lectin found in plants in dealing with COVID-19 and COVID-2 infection. And this is what it had to say. Based on prior studies on coronaviruses, mannose-specific plant lectins offer potential applications to prevent SARS-CoV-2 infection and COVID-19. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? So where are these mannose binding lectins found? Believe it or not, they're found in every single plant that you can think of. That's where they are. That's good news, right? However, it's not good news for the Americans who are not consuming plants, which is at least half of the United States, are not really consuming enough plants to make one serving of fruit or 3 servings of vegetables, I'm sure is going to be helpful. But we really would want more. 7 times the normal blood levels in that Ebola study. We want to increase these things. How many of you like strawberries? Anyone? Persimmons, cucumbers. Any of these have mannose binding lectin in them. There are some that have a little bit more. Some of these would include things like sunflowers. And some of these mannose binding lectins that are found in sunflowers actually have anti-inflammatory effects. Other mannose binding lectins, I believe, some that are found in maybe it was watercress. I have this in another seminar series. Watercress, antifungal. So pretty amazing. These things are so health promoting. We call them phytonutrients or phytochemicals. But above all, there's one thing that has more mannose binding lectin than I think just about any other plant. You want to know what it is? If you really want to boost your mannose binding lectin levels, right here. Garlic, and all in the allium family. So that would include garlic, onions, leeks, shallots. Am I forgetting any? Green onions? Yeah, what is it? Scallions, exactly. All of these are very high in mannose binding lectin. They're also high in many other compounds that are medicinal as well. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But first I want to show you something. Do you remember the comorbidities also that we discussed? This was on night 1. We realized that there are various factors that increase our susceptibility to serious coronavirus infection. Among them, and most prominent, would be high blood pressure, obesity, chronic lung disease, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. Now, take a look at what garlic does besides just taking care of giving you mannose binding lectin. What else can it do? Garlic and garlic-derived bioactives such as allicin that's found in the garlic have significant medicinal properties with the potential of decreasing, I'll just skip that, hypertension and associated morbidity. What was the number 1 risk factor, basically, or comorbidity with COVID? Remember? Hypertension, high blood pressure. So garlic can help reduce the risk of a serious COVID infection on a number of levels. And we're going to actually spend quite a few minutes talking about this because it's so important. So amazing, right? Totally amazing. Okay, now here's another tidbit here. Has anyone ever heard of a doctor, she passed away recently, but she was a very famous doctor, Agatha Thrash? Yes. Okay. I had the privilege of touring with Dr. Agatha Thrash for about a year, and I would go with her. I would set up her computer. I would watch her present. She taught me a lot, and it was such a tremendous blessing to be able to do that with her. But I loved her garlic presentation. And I'm going to tell you the benefits of garlic based on what Dr. Agatha Thrash would have said if she was here today. Okay, are you ready for this? Garlic. It's antibacterial. It's antifungal. It's antiviral. It's antihypertensive or high blood pressure. It's anti-high cholesterol. It's toxin. It helps to remediate toxins. It's anti-cancer. Let's see, I could go on and on, honestly. I kind of forget however many she usually would give, but there's one drawback. It is anti-friend. However, given the pandemic that we're in, this is a good thing, okay? Because garlic also increases social distancing. And it does so in a really interesting way because it allows both parties, the one out of fear of offense and the other out of offense, to part their ways a little bit. So if you're getting too close, then, that will back you up a little bit, won't it? That garlic. And that's not a bad thing, believe it or not, because when you exude how do you metabolize the sulfur compounds in garlic? A lot of them are exuded through the lungs, and that's actually a good thing. In fact, I have a little story here. This was, and before I tell you the story, there is a serious complication of COVID-19. After the virus has done its course, you have decreased neutrophils, so you're much more at risk for secondary bacterial pneumonia, okay? Now let me tell you something about pneumonia. I worked at Wildwood Hospital for maybe 5-6 months, and there was a doctor that came in who would only come in on weekends just to cover for people that wanted to do something else. And he told me, he said, Ron, I'm going to tell you a story. I am in the medical field, and I'm working in this hospital a number of years ago, and I developed a severe case. I think it was a Pseudomonas infection in his lungs, bacterial pneumonia, very, very persistent bacterial pneumonia. And he said no antibiotic would take care of it. Finally, after dealing with this for months, this walking pneumonia, I decided to come to Wildwood. And I went to my room first day, and there was a little old lady. That's what term he used. Little old lady who came from the lunchroom, and she said, I heard that you've got pneumonia. I'm going to fix you up. And so she went back, and every meal that she served, she also had one little clove of garlic that she had minced up on a little plate for him. She said, eat this with your food. And you know what? I don't know how long it took, maybe a couple of weeks. It was a very stubborn case of bacterial pneumonia, but it was resolved and didn't come back. He was a believer in garlic, okay? I didn't smell that proof, but he was a believer. But let me tell you something. This is very important. I have vowed that I will never make this same mistake again. Actually, there are two mistakes. One, never eat this on an empty stomach, okay? You don't want to do that unless you like the emetic effect, which is beyond nausea, if you understand what I'm saying. Eat it with food. And also, temperance, the principle of temperance applies to garlic. Please, it definitely applies to garlic. It's so important that you know that. Experts recommend only 1 to 2 cloves of garlic per day. That's all you need to get the antibacterial effect and many of the other good effects from garlic. Now, I need to tell you what a clove is, okay? I need to tell you. A clove is one of the... I'm going to get really close to this because I don't want there to be any misunderstanding. This is a clove right here. Everyone see that? If someone is asleep, nudge them. This is very important. This is a clove right here. Everyone see that? Okay, good. I'm going to tell you the story why I remind everyone about this. I was doing a seminar in Yuma, Arizona, and there was a middle-aged man that came in, and he learned about the benefits of garlic, and he decided, I'm going to go home and take some garlic. And you know what? I was setting up my computer the next day, getting ready for the presentation. It was about half an hour before it was time to begin, and this young man comes through the doors, and he heads straight for me. And I think I smelled him before I saw him. And I knew what he was going to say. I didn't know the extent of it, though. He said, I am never doing that again. I said, what did you do? He said, I had a clove of garlic. And I said, what is your... Another step back. What is your concept of a clove? You know that thing. Oh, and I said, I never want you to do that again. Please, a clove is not a bulb. It's the small piece that you had many of, probably. So this is why I remind everyone. I have vowed, whenever I present on garlic, I tell that story. So no one else has to suffer. And I'll tell you, he was not the only one who suffered through that. It was everyone in the room, I think. Social distancing was in effect. So yes, it's important to use moderation with garlic consumption. Okay? Very important. Yes, question.
But the bulb comes in small bulbs and large bulbs.
That's true. That's true. I will leave that up to you. Use your best judgment. But the standard size, let's say a standard size bulb, you know, one little clove. Maybe the size of your thumb. Maybe that's a good rule of thumb. 2 thumbs up. Just remember that. 2 thumbs up is good. Okay, yes. Question back here.
Does cooking diminish it?
That's a good question. In fact, it does change some of the properties of the medicinal compounds. It can provide more coverage in other areas. So, for instance, if you're looking for the anti-hypertensive or anti-high cholesterol effects of garlic, I believe that eating them maybe steamed would be helpful. Now, here's a really wonderful way of eating garlic, and we really enjoy this as a family. We kind of moved away from it, but I'll remind my children, and they'll remind me that they like to eat garlic this way. You don't even have to peel the individual cloves. Break apart the bulb and put it in a pot that has, you know, the steamer, like you steam vegetables in, and steam the garlic cloves for maybe 5 to 7 minutes until they're a little soft, and well, maybe a little bit more than a little soft, because you don't want there to be that really strong garlic bite. It becomes more of a savory experience. And in fact, you've had roasted garlic before, right? It's delicious, isn't it? Well, steamed garlic is just as good, and you have a little bit more of the medicinal compounds in there as well. So when I worked at Uchee Pines, Dr. Agatha Thrash would often recommend only up to 2 of the cloves, 2 thumbs up, of raw garlic, and maybe 10 steamed cloves per day. And believe it or not, the steamed cloves are very easy to eat. All you do, once it's steamed, the coating starts to break away, and you just pop it, just pops right out of the shell. And it tastes very good. We really enjoyed it. Even my children like to eat this. So there's a way you can have garlic, and you can enjoy the broad spectrum effects if you have both raw and the cooked garlic. Here's another way I like to eat garlic, and also to encourage social distancing. I will take one of these, and I learned this from my wife, by the way. She had a sore throat one day, and I noticed there was a bulge in her mouth, in the side of her mouth, like this. I said, "What are you doing?" Said, "Oh, I've got garlic in my mouth." I said, "Really?" And she went on to explain how she would utilize this. It was a garlic lozenge. Now, I do not recommend chewing the garlic up and leaving that in your mouth. It gets too hot, too pungent. But if you just take that garlic and you just crack it a little bit with your teeth and leave it intact, it actually has this, it's just a nice garlic taste. It's not too hot, and it is a lozenge. And when the garlic taste kind of starts to wear away, well, just bite it a little bit again. Don't chew it up, but just bite it again. And it actually has this long-lasting garlic flavor to it. Sounds good, doesn't it? Okay, now, you may still be concerned about the breath factor, and so this is why I'm going to share another study with you. It's one of my favorite studies on garlic, by the way. It was done over in India. You see, these Indian doctors had some issues with ventilated patients developing pneumonia, severe pneumonia, and even dying from the pneumonia. And so they tried all these things, and then they got like MRSA, antibacterial resistant pneumonia, antibiotic resistant pneumonia. And they thought, well, what can we do, because these drugs are not working? And one of those men remembered, oh, maybe, and I'm kind of hypothesizing here, but I think this is what happened. I used to use garlic for infections back at home, you know, one of those folk remedies. Let's try that for these patients. And so they mixed up this garlic broth, and they got, you know, those sponges that you can use when you're on NPO orders. You can still put that sponge in your mouth, you know. Well, they just dipped those sponges in this garlic broth, and they sponged all around. Guess what? No more ventilator-associated pneumonia on their unit. Now, these doctors, they got so excited. They thought that they had just reinvented the wheel, even though garlic has been around for a while. And they made all sorts of recommendations. I wish I had this on the screen, but I'll just tell you what they said. One of the recommendations was, we should investigate the benefits of garlic in toothpaste. Who likes that idea? Social distancing. It's good. I'm telling you what. If every American had one bulb of garlic, or maybe two, when this pandemic started, and each person was given the same instruction that you are given now, I don't think we would be in a pandemic anymore. Okay, I really don't. We would be practicing social distancing on our own accord. You wouldn't have to mandate it, you know. And all the wonderful benefits, the anti-infective benefits of garlic. And it's so simple, isn't it? It's so simple. And yet it's so profound. Well, it turns out that civilizations in ancient times up until maybe the mid-1900s were using garlic for this reason. It does help. It does work in many ways. So, that's my recommendation on garlic. Let's move on here. Let's talk about influenza, because one of my favorite remedies is linked to influenza. But it also has potential for coronavirus. We don't know exactly how much potential because there are not a lot of studies on it, but I want to show you the studies on influenza itself. So the influenza virus acts like any other virus in that it goes into, well, actually, this is the actual virus here. Let me go back right here. Influenza virus goes into the cell, and it hijacks the cell. It makes the cell start to replicate itself, and then it sends out more viruses, okay? This is an amazing remedy right here, and it has been used for centuries, if not millennium. And that is what we have here. This is the springtime version. Anyone know what this is? Gotta watch for these white flowers, because during the fall, they turn into, and they're very easy to spot when they're this color, they turn into elderberry. Okay, and let me tell you this. If you go to an elderberry tree and you don't see the berries, but you do see these are still highly medicinal, the flowers. Now, there are some really potent, powerful lectins that you don't want to eat that are in the stem and the leaves, so avoid those. But the flowers in small quantities and the berries in small but larger than the flowers, these are the real edible parts of the elderberry itself. And I'll tell you a little story. My family and I, a couple months ago, we went to Florida, went to a big convention, and we really pushed ourselves too much, traveling, lack of sleep, late nights at the convention. And guess what else was there at the convention? The Delta variant. And a lot of people got sick. It was down there in Florida. And sure enough, 2 days after we attended the convention, we started to get symptoms. And so we decided, okay, well, what are we going to do? We were away from home. Thankfully, we had a friend who said, hey, come stay at my house. It's out in the country. You're not going to bother anyone. Just go stay over there. We've already had COVID. Don't worry. We're not worried about it. And so we went to stay at their house. Guess what we found when we went for a walk right down the road from his house? We were walking by, and my daughter said, look, there's elderberry. We turned, and sure enough, there was an elderberry bush. And I don't know if it grows in Florida. I used to harvest in Idaho. It likes to grow by water, but this just a cluster of beautiful black elderberries there, and it was like an answer to prayer. Now, we didn't even pray for it. And I knew if I was back at home, I would be using my elderberry extract, but I didn't have that. So we found this, and we made our own elderberry extract. If you want to know how to do that, the very simplest way is, well, I shouldn't tell you this. I took a few of these berries and just chewed them up. Technically, you don't want to have the raw berries, because if you have too many of them, it can create nausea and you can have stomach upset, because these are lectins, and lectins can be irritating. The lectins that are found in elderberry, they're the medicinal components. but I knew kind of my limit, and these were very ripe. They were actually kind of tasty. They were sweet. And so I had some, and everyone else in the family had some. And then we did make an elderberry extract, and which is very easy to do. You can even, some people make elderberry syrup, you can make elderberry juice. The key is to cook them. So you can harvest if you find, and by the way, there are other berries that look like this, so don't just walk around and say, elderberry, and then go and start picking. Because there are some poisonous berries that look similar to this, but once you realize, like the pokeweed or pokeberry, it has a similar color to the berry. But elderberry is very unique in the structure of the branch. Once you see this and you identify it, it's very easy to identify ever after. And also the leaves are very distinct. And it does grow in a kind of like a bush. It looks like a small tree, a bushy tree. So these, and by the way, very important consideration here. And this goes for any herb. Don't pluck and eat unless you really know what it is. Because there are white flowers that don't look exactly like this, but they're somewhat similar. Water hemlock. And you don't want to eat that. So please, know your herbs if you're going to do any wild crafting, or which is basically picking things out in the wild. But I would encourage you to learn about these things. Once you understand the structure of the branches, and you won't misidentify elderberry. It's very distinct. But for untrained eye, a white flower is a small white flower is a small white flower, right? But just have to be careful with that. Okay, so the elderberry, if we want to make use of it, we can take this and we can cook it down. We have to strip it away from all the little spiny stems. So it's just the berries. And you take the berries, smash them up so that they're oozing out, like a smashed blueberry. Smash these berries up. You can use a potato masher, and then put a little bit of water and cook them. And you just made elderberry juice. If you'd like to make elderberry syrup, then you could put a little bit of maple syrup in there or something like that. There are all kind of recipes online. I'll just kind of leave it at that. But you can make your own elderberry extract for a fraction, and I mean a fraction of the cost that you can buy it for in the store. So, and you can grow this too. It will grow. I don't know if it'll grow in Minnesota, but if it grows in Florida and it grows in Idaho, why not grow in Minnesota too? So it just has to be close to water. So if you have a little spring on your property or a creek, it will grow there very well. Okay, I'm going to tell you a story about elderberry. And this was when I had first learned about the benefits of elderberry. I was working with an evangelist. I was teaching health and wellness and also helping him with doing some outreach in the neighborhood. And I had previously gone into the woods with my family. I like to go for walks. And I found some elderberry. It wasn't black elderberry. I think it was red elderberry. There's red elderberry, black elderberry, and one more, maybe yellow. But black elderberry is thought to be the most medicinal. But this was the red elderberry variety, which is still somewhat helpful. And so I gathered these clusters that I found, and I brought it back home, and I made elderberry extract, and we drank most of it. Our family really liked it. And then I saved one bottle of it. It was maybe 4 ounces. And turns out that this evangelist I was working with, he was coming down with the flu. And this was a really bad flu season. And he was supposed to be preaching. Evangelists, they're pretty busy when they're doing their series, right? And he was coming down with the flu. And he was driving me home. He was coughing, and I had already had the elderberry, so I wasn't really concerned. But I said, hold on, wait a minute before you leave. And I ran in the house, and I got the elderberry, brought it back to him, and I said, this is elderberry. It might be helpful. I should have told him how much he should take, but in hindsight. But I saw him the next day, and he said, Ron, I'm better. I'm all better now. He was getting sick. His family had already, they had the flu full blown, and he was getting sick. But he took the elderberry and he was all better. I said, how much did you take? I just drank the whole bottle. It worked. I'm surprised he didn't get nauseated, but maybe he did and didn't tell me. But I'll tell you what, he became a proponent of elderberry. Every time I saw him, he said, Ron, they've got it in lozenges now. So he became a believer. And I'll tell you, once you use these things, you're going to start recommending them as well, if you use them in moderation, of course. Let me tell you a little, this is actually a study here. Very interesting study. And this is a gold standard study. Randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled study. Even your doctors would appreciate this study. Okay? They took 60 patients with flu-like symptoms. And of course, other patients with no symptoms, or no, they would be both the flu-like symptoms. Half of them, they gave elderberry to 5 days, elderberry 4 times a day. Okay? Now listen to what happened here. The symptoms relieved 4 days earlier in the elderberry group. 4 days earlier, without the use of inhalers for asthmatics. So you think of the most at-risk group for influenza would be asthmatics. They were even okay. They didn't need as much of the rescue, that's called rescue medications. And their bottom line take-home message was, quote, elderberry extract seems to offer an efficient, safe, and cost-effective treatment for influenza. It's pretty amazing, isn't it? Very amazing. Now, I'm going to show you how elderberry works, at least some of the physiology behind it. You see, elderberry has lectins that are very powerful. It also has something called ribosomal deactivating proteins. We'll explain what that means in just a moment. But first, the lectin. So what do lectins do? What did we learn? Remember the mannose binding lectin? It binds to what? Sugar, right? The mannose sugar in this case. Well, this elderberry lectin, I forget the sugar that it binds to. It's different than mannose. But it is a sugar that's contained on the exterior surface of many viruses. In fact, probably most viruses. Now, even Ebola, I found that out recently. So what happens with the elderberry lectins is they come and they adhere to the to the virus. And if the virus is still able to get inside of the cell, which it might not at that point, so I do have this little diagram, might just stop the virus in its tracks right there. But what if it does get inside? Well, it brings those lectins inside with it. And those lectins, or at least the proteins that may even be associated with or there in the general vicinity that have come in as well, they're the ribosomal deactivating proteins. Remember, the cell is hijacked and the instruction is emptied out from the virus, and the cell is told to make more of me. Remember, very selfish. The virus is selfish. But guess what the ribosomal deactivating proteins do? They say, nope, not on my watch. You're not making viruses. It shuts down the factory. And so the virus, even if the virus is in the cell, it cannot reproduce itself. Isn't that amazing? So the virus, not only can it be kept out of the cell, but if it does get in the cell, it can be rendered harmless when it's there. That's amazing, isn't it? Elderberry. I believe God placed those properties there. I think that's too much of a coincidence for all of those things to happen at just the right time and place. You know how much infrastructure and research it would take for someone to develop a pharmaceutical that had 100 side effects but did the same thing? A long time. In fact, they have developed some of these things like ribosomal deactivating proteins, but they're highly toxic because it turns out that the ribosomal deactivating proteins in elderberry, they don't go into the cell unless they're needed. But ribosomal deactivating proteins, man-made, they're toxic. They'll just shut down any cell's ability to make proteins, which is important. The cell might need to build something, and it takes that ability away. So that's prone to side effects, but not with the elderberry. That I believe is truly amazing. Okay, here's another source of ribosomal deactivating proteins. How many of you have seen this before? Okay, I knew that there would only be a couple hands, unless I was in India or China, because they eat this all the time. In fact, if you have an Asian store, you probably can find bitter melon. It's used in a lot of recipes. Very, very profound effects on diabetes, by the way. They found that bitter melon works like metformin, but with fewer side effects. It helps the body to utilize sugar, or the cells to utilize sugar. But this bitter melon also has ribosomal deactivating proteins that could potentially stop viral replication. And there are a number of other plants that will have this. Now, the neat thing about plants is that you don't have to go to the Amazon or to Africa or to Asia to find something that's medicinal. A lot of people will think, I've got to have that certain thing that only grows in the Amazon, in the nether regions of the subtropical demographic. I'm getting into other terms, but you know what I mean, right? This highly elusive herb. Well, guess what? There are many herbs that do the same thing. And a lot of times they grow in your own area. In fact, you could spend hundreds of dollars on herbs that come from Amazon, Amazon and the Amazon. But you could just probably go outside and pick a few of them off your lawn if you just knew what they were. I encourage everyone, get an herb book, know your local herbs. It may come in handy one day when you can't run to the Amazon or contact Amazon. I had a question over here.
That can be grown here. My friend had it.
Excellent.
And she grew it and I eat it all the time.
Excellent. Now, if anyone grows this here, make sure you contact Greta, right? Make sure you contact Greta to know how to do that. Because it is bitter, and you don't want to eat the inside, you eat the outside. It's kind of like the opposite of watermelon. So contact her before you try to eat this.
Really
Yes.
It's not bitter when you cook it right.
Exactly. But it is good when it's bitter too. I kind of like it. My family hates it, but I'll eat it bitter because I know how good it is for me. And I'll tell you something. When I first became interested in health and wellness, I came from a background of a very destructive lifestyle. And I had done so much devastation to my body that I decided I want to be healthy. I don't care how it tastes. I'm going to eat it. I would eat my salads without salad dressing. I used to. I would eat anything. And I'll tell you what, I lived with 4 other guys. And I said, hey, I'm going to cook something healthy. You know what they would do? They would leave. Because I'll tell you what, I didn't care how it tasted. I would just eat it. Oh, this is healthy. But believe it or not, you can enjoy healthy food, and you should. Don't make the mistake I made. But still, I'll eat it. I just have this strong health drive, I guess. I'll eat it even if it is bitter, even if it doesn't taste good. But you don't have to be like me. You can make it taste good. Okay. And as I said before, it doesn't have to just be this very unique plant or fruit that gives you benefits. It really is what you can even find in your local grocery store. Yes, question.
I'm on metformin. What would happen if I was using that in addition to using the metformin?
That's a good question. I would definitely ask your doctor, because it would have an effect that would be synergistic, meaning you may bottom out with your blood sugar. Yeah. If your doctor won't answer you, if he says, oh, don't use those herbs, then go find a doctor who will listen to you.
He told me 2 weeks ago, I'll just go with science. So he's interested in it.
Well, here's what you can do. There are many doctors who are getting people off of their diabetic medication, but monitoring them while they reverse the diabetic process. And that's the key. Also with hypertension. you don't want to just quit antihypertensive medications cold turkey, because what will happen, you have rebound effects. And these things are very strong medications. So we have to, sometimes you have to taper off of them. And really it's the doctor who's going to be able to help you with that. And if you can't find a local doctor, then go online and search for someone who specializes in diabetes reversal. And I can tell you, there are lifestyle centers all around. Wildwood Lifestyle Center, Uchee Pines Lifestyle Center. There's a place out in California. In fact, the owners of that lifestyle center are coming here in January. Years Restored, excellent lifestyle center in Northern California. In fact, I would say right now they're the preeminent lifestyle center for dealing with autoimmune disease and cancer. Very good success rates. And they don't pay me for saying that. I really respect what they're doing. Question back here.
Well, I've been a diabetic for over 44 years,
Mm-hmm.
and I've heard these claims for many times, and I've actually done, not what you guys talk about, but I've done with the aloe plant,
Mm-hmm.
boil it down, and you can drink it,
Yeah.
which it worked. I mean, I didn't have to take my shot for almost 3 weeks.
Mm.
The side effect was I dehydrated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Was that type 1 or type 2?
Type 1.
Yes, type 1 is different. In fact, very few people will honestly be able to claim that they can help you completely reverse type 1 diabetes. There's only one lifestyle center that I have seen where actually a doctor and his son, both type 1 diabetic, they went to this lifestyle center, and you know what? The son reversed his type 1 diabetes. I think it came back later. But the thing about it is, you have to be very strict with a regimen with type 1 diabetes, because it is type 1 diabetes, it depends on what's causing it, but it's something that you're going to have to battle the rest of your life potentially. But just to know that they were able to reverse that for a short amount of time until the young man started, doing other things and being more careless with his lifestyle, was very promising to me. The father, however, the doctor, was able to decrease his need for insulin. And if you can do that, that will at least be a help. That's a step in the right direction. But yeah, type 1 diabetes is a different disease process than type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes, some experts estimate that up to 90% of type 2 diabetics can reverse their disease process. How do you know if you're in that 10% or 90%? Well, you won't know until you try. So I would encourage anyone with type 2 diabetes to seek out one of these diabetes reversal programs, because they're very comprehensive. It's not just about, like I said, it's not just about turmeric or even aloe. It's not just about a single natural remedy. It's about a holistic approach. Everything that we do, how it impacts that process, and how we can start that reversal. To give you another insight, I remember reading in my nursing textbook, and this is mainstream medicine, nursing textbook, I read that if type 2 diabetics would lose 10 pounds as a result of a moderate physical exercise program and continue on, they start to reduce their need for insulin. It's just this process that happens. So when you combine that with other aspects of a healthy lifestyle that are focused on reversing the diabetic process, it is possible to reverse type 2 diabetes. I've seen it happen. I've seen people come in with a bag full of anti-diabetic medication, and including insulin. And after 18 days, you know what they walk out with? None of it. Of course, they still have to be monitored, because especially if they forget to do those things, which are usually very simple, if they forget to do those things, then yes, they could start to need insulin again, because the diabetic process is not being reversed. And I have a whole series on reversing diabetes, so we can't spend too much time on that right now, but I will tell you that there are places that you can go. There are even programs that you can enter in, and books that you can buy that will help you through that process. But the best way to do it is physician supervised, especially if you're on diabetic medication. Okay? All right. So, once again, so many benefits here in your shopping cart. Now, I'm going to show you something really amazing. Oh, actually, I do have a comment on this I need to make. One of those comorbidities that we saw related to COVID-19 was heart disease. Remember seeing that? Heart disease? Okay. There was a study that showed, and a number of studies since have shown, that consuming a total plant-based diet, and this is not just celery sticks and cucumbers, you know, it just, like what you had downstairs, that's a plant-based diet too. Okay, there's a wide variety of things that are included in that. A total plant-based diet, these individuals reduce the incidence of heart disease by 86%. 86% risk reduction in heart disease. Now, that could reduce your risk of that comorbid condition that increases your risk of severe COVID, remember? So in a roundabout way, it could help with what? With COVID. Now, here's another study that directly links to COVID. You want to see this? I just saw the graph. Honestly, I just saw this graph today, and it was quite eye-opening. It's a study that was published in the British Medical Journal Nutrition and Prevention and Health, 2021, rather recently. And what it found was that it was a large population study as well. What it found was that individuals on a plant-based diet had greatly decreased odds of having severe COVID, or they would call this moderate to severe COVID, than individuals on plant-based diets and including fish, the pescatarian diet. See this? So right here we have, this is your least risk right here. See 0? That'd be great to get it to 0, wouldn't it be? But it's close to 0 here. Then the next, if you add in the pescatarian aspects or the fish, then that does increase the risk a little bit. But look at this. This was startling. I had not even heard this before. Over here, this is low-carb, high-protein diets. Look at that. And what are all Americans on right now? The keto diet, right? We need to warn people about this because that is a greatly increased risk of severe, moderate to severe COVID, just based on diet type. And I don't know the exact reasons why, but it's just something to take into consideration when we're planning our meals. Now, I'm not endorsing that you just overnight become a strict plant-based vegetarian. If you want to do that, I did that. Well, it took me a little while, but I did it. But I want to encourage you, remember the pathway to health? I want to encourage you to start including more, at least, including more fruit and vegetables in the diet. How many of you think you can do that? Remember, the average American only consumes, well, 50% of Americans consume 1 serving of fruit per day and less than 3 servings of vegetables per day. We need to do better than that because we're in trouble. Why is the United States of America a hotbed for COVID? This is one of the reasons right here. And believe it or not, the keto diet, that's a fad diet. It comes around every 30 years or so, or maybe 40 years. Why? Because physiologically it can help lose weight, but it has side effects. One of the side effects I just recently found out, extremely elevated estrogen in men. You know that? Estrogen goes sky high with the keto diet. All those ketones being produced has an effect on the estrogen. I don't know why, but you can find this in studies. Just Google it. You'll see, yeah, it increases estrogen significantly. So there's some good things about a keto diet, though. There really are. Some of those ketones are very medicinal. One of them is, what's the name? Starts with a B. I'll have to look it up later, but just take my word for it. It's very beneficial. And I'll tell you a little reason why. Because when this starts to be produced, you also have a huge decrease in the amount of, you know what, I'm just going to show you the study. Let me just grab this. I know I have this here. I was just looking at it earlier. Here it is. And I will even be able to tell you the name of this ketone, okay? Let's see. Yes, here it is. Okay. This ketone is, where is this? It's here somewhere. Well, they call it DBHD. DBHD. Do I have this in my notes? Oh, yeah. Beta hydroxybutyrate. So hydroxybutyrate. You can actually buy this as a supplement. I don't recommend it because I don't recommend these supplements in isolated. See, once a manufacturer realizes, hey, this is the compound that helped these people, let's isolate it and replicate it and market it. We don't know what side effects it will have in the body, but hey, it's good for you in some way. And then it could cause problems. So what I recommend is getting it from the natural source, which is your body. Your body will produce it, and I can tell you how this happens. But let me just show you the study. What they found was that as fasting increased, so what does fasting mean? You're not eating, right? As fasting increased, when it got up to 18 hours, you had high levels of hydroxybutyrate. In fact, it seems almost like it peaked at 18 hours. Well, guess what happens correspondingly to elevated levels of hydroxybutyrate? Allergic sensitivity goes down in a dose-dependent manner. So I found out about this, and this was when I was having really severe hay fever and allergies. And I can remember shopping. Thankfully, this was before COVID. I would have been kicked out of the store. But I was shopping, and I was moving the hangers across the aisle and rubbing my nose. It was miserable. And as I said before, thankfully, it wasn't during COVID season. But I got home, and I thought, I wonder if fasting would help. I'm going to research this, and what I found was profound. So I realized, okay, I'm going to try to do, and before this time, fasting was very difficult for me. I have a high metabolism. I have to eat, or so I think, and I just didn't want to. But I thought, okay, I'm going to bear with it. I'm going to try 18 hours. And by the way, I did cheat a little bit, but it wasn't cheating because I knew what I was doing. And I'll explain that in just a minute. So what happened was, at 18 hours of this fast, guess what? My nose dried up. No more sensitivity, allergic sensitivity. I was cured. And guess what? The allergies didn't come back. Before, I'd been struggling with hay fever entire seasons, but the allergies didn't come back. In fact, they challenged mice that would normally have an anaphylactic reaction to this irritant after fasting for, I think it was 18 to 24 hours. Guess what happened? None of them had an anaphylactic reaction. Okay, now I'm going to tell you how I was cheating. Now, I wasn't really cheating because what I was doing was producing ketones. Okay? There are benefits to ketones, but I would say short-term benefits to ketones. Okay? Prolonged if you're fasting for 40 days, do you think your body's going to become somewhat malnourished? You're running off of ketones at that point. You're going to be, there's a lot of physiologic things going on. So what I did here, I just had salads for my meal, just leafy greens. And by the way, I had a few macadamia nuts thrown in there, okay? And those are not high in carbohydrates, so yes, it helped me produce the ketones. But guess what? I stopped after 18 hours. Why? Because I realized that I accomplished my mission. Now I can go back to eating normally, okay? So short-term ketogenesis is a good thing. Long-term ketogenesis causes side effects. Okay, one of those side effects might be weight loss, but it comes at a cost. There are other ways of losing weight that are much more healthy. Now, here's the good news. You can fast today to get this benefit, and you will notice that in your allergies, whether they be food allergies and by the way, if you have an anaphylactic reaction to peanuts, don't go try on peanuts, still stay away from those things. But you'll notice like seasonal allergies, At least in my case, and according to the research, it seems to help. Now, here's another bit of good news. You can produce hydroxybutyrate also when you exercise. When you exercise. So through exercising, we continually produce levels of this ketone that helps us with allergies. It helps to reduce the severity of allergies, or maybe you don't even have allergies anymore. And I've noticed that as well. So maybe if hay fever's coming on, one day of fasting, if you can handle it, or with one day of salads, without a rich salad dressing, by the way. Maybe you could put a little bit of lemon on it or something. No, keep it simple. But one day of fasting followed by a regular physical activity regimen could keep your hay fever away. I can't make that claim entirely, but it's worth a try, right? Definitely worth a try. Better than suffering a whole season with hay fever with these allergies. Okay, so that's just my little aside there. Let me go back. I thought you would appreciate that, right? Okay. All right, let's go back to this. Okay. So yes, there are side effects to low-carb, high-protein, high-fat diets. One of them is increased mortality of COVID. So you don't need to do the ketogenic diet, extended diet, to get health benefits when it's causing health detriments at the same time. There are ways and means of getting the benefits of ketones without a long-term ketogenic diet. Okay, so let's go on here. I want to show you another really amazing study that kind of goes along the same lines. We learned that obesity over the past 25 years, did it increase or decrease significantly? It increased. If you heard the first night, you saw that increased dramatically. In fact, the CDC had estimated that this is the worst pandemic at that point in 2010 when they commented on this, the worst pandemic this country has ever seen. So I found an interesting study that was called BMI by diet type. And this is dealing with averages, by the way. Not everyone is going to fit into this, but let's say just the average individual that consumes a certain type of diet, okay? There are what we call outliers, and there are probably many of them that are different BMIs, but still have the same diet. But if you were to average everyone together, this is what we're going to see. We'll start with non-vegetarians. This is the standard American diet. Less than 1 serving of fruit per day, less than 3 servings of vegetables, if even that. Basically, you ask this individual, do you like fruits and vegetables? No, I hate Brussels sprouts, right? I mean, but you can be healthy and still hate Brussels sprouts, by the way. I have an interesting story about Brussels sprouts. Maybe I will not. There are young children here. I will not say that. I'll tell you later if you want to hear it. My mom might be watching too, but she knows what I did, so. We'll just say there was a table involved, there was a hidden cubby in the table, and there was also an occasional dog. And I'll leave it at that. And there were Brussels sprouts. Okay, let's go on here. So, non-vegetarians, the average BMI was 28.8. What does that mean? That's very close to the, right here, to the obese category. See that? The obese, well, it would, yeah. Obese category is 30 and above. So we already see there's something going on here. We already know that fruit and vegetables are important to include these into our diet. And when we start to include these into our diet, look what happens. Just by eating more fruit and vegetables, we already see a decrease in the BMI. Significant decrease, almost 2 points. Which would make a big difference. That's a lot of pounds right there. So 27.3 for semi-vegetarian. That's just eating more fruit and vegetables. Okay, now here's another one. Pescatarians. This means these individuals will consume fish, dairy, and fruit and vegetables, right? And also legumes, you know, the whole plant family. But the only meat they're having is fish, okay? But they'll eat everything else. But look at their BMI. What's happening? It's decreasing. As I said before, this is average. It's not going to fit everyone. It's just an average of all those in the study. Okay, here's where we start to see a pretty dramatic difference. And this is when, okay, lacto-ovo-vegetarians. Anyone know what that means?
Yeah. Eggs and dairy.
Eggs and dairy and plants, right? So look at the average lacto-ovo-vegetarian, 25.7. What is considered a normal BMI or ideal BMI? It's 18 to 24.9999999. Above 25 is considered the beginning of being overweight. What was the average lacto-ovo-vegetarian? They were slightly overweight. Everyone see that in the study? Now, here's the only group that was in the ideal range on average. You ready for it? Anyone have any guesses? Total plant-based. Total plant. And vegan, not necessarily, because they probably were eating honey. That's, there's a technicality there. But they were only eating plants, right? So only eating plants, their average BMI. And sometimes you think, well, those vegans. And by the way, I might not represent all the vegans. I think my BMI is about 21. So I'm probably on the low side. But the average vegan is actually 23.6. Pretty good. That's an ideal weight right there. And as I said before, the ideal weight is 18 to 24. So there's something to consider. But as I said before, what's the real important thing to do? It's to start on that pathway to health. That's the most important thing to do. Because it's hard to change your diet. I know, I'm living proof. It took me a while to get where I am with my diet, and I still have a way to go. But I need to tell you about this study. And I'll just tell you something. I don't look forward to, I don't say, oh no, I'm going to have to change my diet because I learned this thing is not good for me. Oh no, I used to do that, by the way. And then I realized it's not good for you to do that. So I just realized, okay, I understand. I will try to improve my diet even more. And believe it or not, I actually feel better when I do that. And I grow to accept it, and I grow to like it. And there was a group of scientists who got some people together. And their hypothesis for this study was, we know there are benefits. Obviously, there are benefits to a total plant-based diet, but we think these people are going to be so miserable, it's going to negate all of the positive effects. That was their hypothesis for this study. And so they modeled the plan for how the study was going to be run, and they gave these individuals quality of life index cards. So they were to relate how their quality of life was at various steps of their advancing diet. And their hypothesis was they're going to be miserable. They're going to hate this, and of course, anxiety is a fruitful cause of disease, and so it doesn't matter, if you eat healthy or not. That was their hypothesis. Well, guess what happened? It turns out the quality of life index cards started to come back in, and the researchers said, oh, this guy, he's liking what he's doing. He's feeling good. He says, I want to continue doing this. What is going on? He said the same. She said the same thing here. They said that maybe there are a few that didn't like what they were doing, but the vast majority in the study, they felt like their quality of life improved when they started to improve their diet. That's pretty interesting, isn't it? Now, standing far back and thinking about it, you may not, even the scientists, they thought, we don't think they're going to like it. But I'll tell you what, this is where you can really try to understand how it works. Not just to think about it or to be anxious about it, but to try it. Try it. And get a good cookbook. That's important too, because it should taste good. But it may taste different than the things we've been eating before. But it still will taste good, and it should taste good. What quote, the verse in the Bible, taste and see that the Lord is good, right? And the things that he's made for us, they're pretty good. And all of us can find things easily in the plant kingdom that we like. It may be more difficult to totally transition over to an all-plant diet, but it is possible. I'm living proof of that. And if you want to get to the highest echelon of your potential for health, it's something to consider, prayerfully consider, okay? But I think everyone here can at least acknowledge, which is important, it's the foundation, that it's important to start including more of these healthy foods in the diet. Wouldn't you agree with me? That is the most important thing, to just start and to see how it's beneficial. Just like starting to drink more water. See the benefits of that. It really is helpful. And as we saw, diabetes is one of these comorbidities for COVID. So we could be reducing on a number of different avenues, reducing our risk of severe COVID based on this principle of plant-based diet, or at least increasing our intake of fruit and vegetables. Okay, here's another reason, and this is going to get a little technical, but don't worry, it'll make perfect sense as I explain it. I'm going to explain how inflammation arises in the body. Does anyone like inflammation? No. Well, actually, inflammation can be good. It just depends on where it is. Your muscles, if you want to build muscle, they have to become inflamed a little. You have to use them, and then they build up and bulk up. So a little bit of inflammation can be a good thing. But the body involved in systemic inflammation, headaches, joint pain, no one wants that, right? That's not good. There is a reason why inflammation should happen, but the problem is for most people it's happening unnecessarily and systemically, okay? And it's causing disability. So how does this work? Well, I'm going to show you the pathway of how inflammation can affect the system with the systemic effects here. You could have a toxic compound or even infection, cellular injury. Now, by the way, you could pick up at any of these areas over here. You could pick up at, could you bruise your knee and get inflammation? Yeah, and then you could be right here on this pathway. Then what happens here is your white blood cells are activated because they have a part to play. Remember the macrophages? They clean up the dead and dying tissue. And so you will have some of that with the inflammation. Pro-inflammatory cytokines, these chemical messengers are produced by the white blood cells. Then we have something here that I'm going to focus on more than anything else. And this seems like a complex term, but it's actually very simple. Activation of the arachidonic acid pathway. So next time you go to the doctor, tell him, I'm tired of activating my arachidonic acid pathway. Can you help me? Okay? And he will know what you're talking about. He'll be amazed, but he'll know what you're talking about. Because this is where the rubber meets the road with inflammation right here. Okay? Now, why did I bother teaching you this? Because it's so important for you to know. So important. What do most people run and get when they have inflammation? Aspirin. What else? Ibuprofen, Tylenol. Anything else? Advil. What are all of these things grouped under? Non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, or NSAIDs. Okay? There's been some controversy regarding NSAIDs and COVID-19. In fact, I'll read this. Let me just skip to the study. COVID-19 and NSAIDs, a narrative review of knowns and unknowns. Now, if you come down with COVID-19, it depends on who you go to. They may or may not warn you about taking NSAIDs for the fever or the aches and pains that start with the onset of COVID-19. But it's my belief that you should be warned and that you should make an informed decision. Because you know who says you should take it? The manufacturer. I went to their website. Oh, yes, it's safe. Don't worry. Why are you so worried about this? Take it. Take it. Why? It's good for their bottom line. I mean, I hope that's not the only reason why they're saying to take it, but there are some serious concerns about COVID-19 and these medications, and I'm going to show you why. It reads, concern, right here, I'm going to read it for you, it's a little small. Concern about the appropriate role of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, or NSAIDs, in COVID-19 speculate that NSAIDs, in particular ibuprofen, may upregulate the entry point for the virus, the ACE2 receptors, and increase susceptibility to the virus or worsen symptoms in existing disease. So they're focusing on what? That it increases, ibuprofen increases what? ACE2 receptors, which are the entry points of the virus, okay? They went on to say, well, maybe it's okay to take paracetamol, which is, this is in Europe, it's the same thing as Tylenol over here. Maybe you should take Tylenol, but I'm even gonna ask you a question about that. Should you even take Tylenol? Because this is what happens when you take Tylenol. A lot of people don't know this. Remember that arachidonic acid pathway? That's where the rubber meets the road with the inflammatory process. Now, notice we have omega-6, right? Who likes omega-6 fatty acids? We get them in all sorts of like cooking oils and nuts and that kind of thing. One thing to keep in mind is that omega-6 is our reservoir for the production of arachidonic acid. I've known people who have gotten rid of their aches and pains just by cutting out the cooking oils and drying up the reservoir of omega-6. I know it can seem kind of serious and severe to do, but they thought it was worth it, no more pain. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But I'm not going to focus on that too much. What I'm going to focus on is how you can stop inflammation, okay? How you can stop the arachidonic acid pathway. There are two pathways emanating from the arachidonic acid pathway, or the initiation of the release of arachidonic acid. One of them is something called prostaglandins, the prostaglandin pathway. The other is leukotrienes. Prostaglandins tend to go all over the body. And there are some anti-inflammatory prostaglandins, but most of the time we end up, if we have inflammation, we end up producing a single type of prostaglandin more than others. It's called prostaglandin E2, and it is not nice. It's what causes your headaches and your aches and pains, and it's the inflammation that you don't really like when it's occurring in a large amount. The other pathway of inflammation is called leukotriene synthesis, and that occurs in the lungs. Now, systemic inflammation and lung inflammation. So remember, the inflammatory process leads to the production of arachidonic acid, and then where can the inflammation go? Either to the whole body, right? Or where? To the lungs. Now, let me show you how Tylenol and most NSAIDs work. They only block prostaglandins. That's all they block. Okay, anyone concerned yet? Where's the inflammation going to go then? To the lungs. Where does cytokine storm that's deadly in COVID occur? In the lungs. All right. And that's what happens if we're just taking Tylenol and we have severe inflammation happening. And by the way, if you come down with one of these viruses, you are going to have an inflammatory response. It's called the acute phase response in the body. You may not even have a whole lot of viral infection yet, but your body is gearing up and you're starting to produce these inflammatory compounds. And by taking a Tylenol, you're diverting that inflammation over to the lungs. It's like setting yourself up. It really is. And I'm not making this up. There's a study that was produced entitled Leukotrienes, a Potential Target for COVID-19. This chart here is actually from the study, and it showed exactly what I'm talking about. That when you use NSAIDs, you block the prostaglandins, what you heard of COX-1, COX-2 inhibitor. You block this enzyme, so you block the prostaglandin production, and then what happens? Where does it go? Leukotrienes. right there. And so you have a highly inflammatory environment taking place in the lungs, just primed for coronavirus. That's dangerous. That's dangerous. And those companies who are saying, oh, there's no problem, they're also helping to produce television ads, paying anchors on television stations, giving stipends, or I forget the exact term, to researchers that will write favorable articles in their call. It happens. It happens. It's called marketing. But you and I know better, right? We've seen the studies. How many of you now would want to go and take Tylenol just when you're coming down with COVID? I think it would be highly risky. Highly risky. Here's a close-up of this. So what can we do? Because we've got these aches and pains. Is there anything else that can take the place of these non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs? Well, believe it or not, there are quite a few natural anti-inflammatories that are broad spectrum. Question, sir?
Yeah, for the patients that are going in supposedly with COVID, is given this Tylenol, ibuprofen, part of their normal regimen there?
Some places, it depends on where you go. Because the recommendations I've seen are, we need to be concerned about this, but check with your local doctor or hospital. So they may or may not be. If they're not, you need to tell them, hey, you're going to make me have leukotrienes. You know? Don't excite my arachidonic acid pathway, please. I want to take turmeric. Okay.
One problem, though, is it also, in some cases, a form of pneumonia? Or is it something else?
The COVID? Well, COVID can infect, you can have an infection in the lungs, which would be a viral pneumonia. Now, the real issue is when you get that viral pneumonia and you have this highly inflammatory, dehydrated set of lungs, that all of a sudden the immune system throws everything it has at that. They see that as a huge threat. And that's when you get the cytokine storm. So, and there are probably other variables involved, but hey, there are two things right there that could be very serious players in that response. Question over here.
When I got COVID back a year ago, because I took ibuprofen, that's why maybe I stayed sicker than I should have been?
I don't know. All I can do is speculate, but you've seen what the researchers have said. Now, this is the thing. This is why I do what I do, and this is why I believe this is wellness worth sharing, is because you're not hearing these kind of things, are you? Now, I was delighted to see that in the CDC's recommendations for what to do when you get COVID included go rest and be hydrated. That's good, right? It included that. But most people aren't reading that. I had to actually go on their website and search for it. And most people they're like, hydrated, okay, I'll go drink a Pepsi or a Coke. We need more education than that and support. So that's why I'm doing this, and that's why I believe also you can take this information and share it. And you know what? You don't need to memorize all this stuff. They have it on their live stream, on their YouTube channel here at the church. Share some information and get them to this lecture, online. And hey, you could learn all this. I encourage you to. Learn how the body works, because people need to know these things. And I'll tell you what, I've tried to put some things out especially on YouTube these days, and they block my videos. They took it off. And all I'm trying to do is help people. So it's kind of sad, but nonetheless, we still have other avenues of getting the message out. The person-to-person route is actually very good, and that's why we can go viral, not just simply by spreading COVID, but by spreading good information regarding prevention and COVID. This is really what we need to start doing, this wellness worth sharing. Okay, let me get back to turmeric. This is really amazing. Now, some of you might be taking medications that would interfere or the turmeric would interfere with. This is something to consider. If you are on a prescription medication, check with your pharmacist and ask them if turmeric interferes with this. If it does, there are other anti-inflammatory plants. There are plenty of others. But let's talk about turmeric because it is one of the most powerful. So it turns out that turmeric has compounds that can block prostaglandins via COX-1 and COX-2 and block leukotrienes as well, and reduce the amount of existing leukotrienes. So turmeric is a broad spectrum remedy for inflammation. It doesn't just divert it and change the form and location to somewhere else of inflammation. What it does is it just cuts it out altogether, which is, that's the ideal, isn't it? That's the ideal. That's a good question. There are studies that show a recommendation of the intake of turmeric, and I could get that to you. I don't have that right now, but I'll tell you, turmeric, it's kind of hard to take too much. However, there is that concept of moderation. Well, this is what and when I say it's hard to take too much, some people, like the guy with the garlic, I say it's hard to take too much garlic too. I probably shouldn't say that. Let me back up for a moment here. I don't know exactly what you need, but I'll tell you what I take. If I'm coming down with a headache or something like that, and I'm going to take turmeric to help with it, first of all, I'll try to think, what caused this headache? It probably was, in my case, it's usually lack of sleep. That's what does it for me. And so what I need to do, I need to make sure I get to bed early tonight. But during the meantime, I am going to take some turmeric. And what I'll do is I'll take a teaspoon. Now, two favorites I have. I'll give you my easiest and then my second easiest. The easiest is just to go get some raw turmeric. And it's actually a root, by the way. I'll show you this again. It's like ginger, just smaller and orange. But you can find that. Where can we find that, Jamie? I'm sure they can find it locally somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know. They probably have it at the grocery store. But
Okay.
I can't.
You can always talk to your produce manager at your grocery store. Tell him you have a whole church full of people who want to buy turmeric. Please order it. They need to take care of their arachidonic acid pathways. Okay, so you can just cut, and I would say like a thumb size. This is my recommendation for me, by the way. A thumb-sized chunk of this. And I probably shouldn't tell you this. I'll just take it and I'll chew it up because I like it. Tie my shoe for a minute. I like it. I don't mind the taste of it. But I just spoke with Jamie, and he told me that he likes to cut up pieces of it, kind of mince it up, and put it on food, right? You said you like it like that. Put it on a salad. And that's good. It's a very easy way to take turmeric. Now, here's one very important thing. Turmeric, now this is going to be very absorbable right here because it's encased in water. It's hydrolyzed, I guess. This is very absorbable right here. When it's dry in the dry form, not so much. Especially if it bypasses your mouth and goes straight into the stomach in a capsule. That's why they have to put adjuvants in the capsule that cause an inflammatory response that trigger more blood flow to the stomach so you will absorb the nutrition or the nutrients in the turmeric. Usually they put black pepper, pepperine, which causes the stomach to have a pretty severe reddening response. You don't need that. You don't need to have an inflammatory response to get a good response. So I just totally avoid that. And unfortunately, a lot of capsules that they have that in there. Yeah, question back here.
Another question. If you want to plant turmeric in your garden, you can buy them online, and they are actually perennials.
Perfect. But go to the grocery store the first year. Yeah. Get it from your produce manager. Okay, good point. Now, it turns out that if you want to get the alkaloids like curcumin, you've heard of curcumin before, right? The actual word is curcuminoids. It's an alkaloid substance that's not that absorbable, especially when it comes in powdered form and it goes into the stomach acid. However, research shows that if this is hydrolyzed, that you absorb it much more readily. So, natural state, it's hydrolyzed. What could you do with this? You could put it in water. My favorite is actually to chew it. And you may think, well, I don't want to stain my teeth. That gets pretty yellow, you know? And I had that fear as well. And I said, you know what? It's okay. I'm already married. You know, I don't have to impress anybody. So I'm just going to chew it up. I've got a headache. And yeah, it turned my teeth. I think I'm losing my battery here, maybe. I'm turning my teeth yellow, but it only lasted for a couple hours. And then my teeth looked whiter than they had in months. And I thought, what's going on here? It turns out that turmeric, the curcumin in turmeric, dissolves plaque. No. Plaque, not tartar. Plaque. It dissolves plaque. It even kills Streptococcus mutans, the number one cause of cavities in the mouth. It's amazing. So yeah, chew it up. You will get yellow teeth because it adheres to the do it early in the morning before you have to go to work. It adheres to the plaque, and then it dissolves it. And for me, I think it took a couple hours, and it looked pretty good. So there is a benefit. They even are making some toothpaste with turmeric now. So, yeah, or maybe. Okay. All right, great. That works. Okay, so as I said before, they are making some toothpaste with turmeric, but because of the mess it makes on the white porcelain, bowl, they use something called white turmeric. I've never heard of that before, but that's what they use in the toothpaste. It's very pricey, but you can do it yourself with the yellow. Just be careful when you don't brush your teeth with it. When you eat it for your arachidonic acid pathway mitigation, that's when you can benefit. This is what I do personally. And I've done this with all my children, and they've liked it until recently. I don't know what's going on now that they don't like this, but what we do is I'll take a teaspoon of turmeric and a teaspoon of honey, put it in a usually disposable cup because it does make a sticky mess, and I'll mix it up, and then I take the heaping teaspoon out, and I chew and chew and chew, and I hydrolyze that, and it tastes pretty good, I think. Some people don't like it. Chew and chew and chew, and finally I swallow it, and guess what happens? There's already, based on the research, and I can feel it happening, based on the research, there's an anti-inflammatory cascade that begins in the mouth. Not only are you getting rid of plaque, you're killing the bacteria. And by the way, turmeric kills, I believe, every single common oral pathogen. That means it would kill candida in the mouth. It would kill strep mutans. It would kill, any other pathogenic bacteria commonly found in the mouth, which could be a real good thing. And it's starting this anti-inflammatory cascade in the mouth that goes throughout the head and neck, okay? And it may even permeate a little bit into the sinus cavities as well, because local application, if you can do local application of these medicinal products, it works better. It just does, especially if you're targeting a certain area. That being said, if you've got a headache, it may help a little bit more, but eventually it'll get into the system and the circulation, and those curcumin will be spread throughout the system. and help you with your prostaglandin, your arachidonic acid pathway. So it's pretty amazing, isn't it? It's simple to use. As I said before, maybe the only downside is that you should really chew it up. And by the way, there's a rule of thumb that's very important to consider here. Do you think you absorb more from your food when you chew it or when you swallow it whole? Okay? That's the way usually it works with a lot of these medicinal substances as well. Because your saliva is filled with digestive enzymes, and enzymes that are precursors to the enzymes in the stomach, and precursors to the enzymes in the pancreas, and precursors to the enzymes in the small intestine. So all of it works together. And there's an added bonus. If studies show if you chew your food 20 times, you actually cut your caloric intake by a significant amount as well. So next time you're sitting down to eat with your spouse, watch how many times they chew their food. But be nice. Be nice about it. I'm the kind of person that I'll just chew and chew and chew because I don't know. I guess I've just gotten into the habit. I don't need to count, but I'll tell you, one of the things that kind of gets us in a rut with chewing food thoroughly is fast food. Because you don't need to chew it. It melts in your mouth. Have you noticed that? It does. You take a bite, ooh, it's all of a sudden mush, and you swallow. I can tell you, my mom came to visit me after we started eating healthy at my house, and we made whole wheat biscuits and gravy. And she's from the South, from North Carolina, and she grew up on biscuits and gravy and let's see what else. What's that? Grits. Yes, grits, corn grits, but not whole wheat biscuits. And as she sat down to eat, she had to saw at that biscuit. Now, I think my wife might have burned them a little bit too. That didn't help. Had to saw at that biscuit, and then she took that off. Oh, this is hard. I have to chew this. I said, that's right, Mom. Chewing is good for you. Remember, you tried to give me those Brussels sprouts. I guess I've gotten back at her a lot already. But she thanks me now, just as I thank her for the Brussels sprouts. But yeah, chewing is a good thing. It's one of those highly underrated activities of digestion, but it's so important. Believe it or not, if you want to absorb, let's say, vitamin B12, you have to chew that food that contains vitamin B12. And I don't have time to get into the specifics of vitamin B12. Some people choose to take it as a tablet. In that case, still have to chew it. The saliva you have proteins that protect the B12 from being destroyed by the stomach acid. Otherwise, you're wasting it if you're not chewing it up. So, unless it's some special, highly expensive B12 that's been coated with nanoparticles or something like that. But I recommend just, keeping it simple and chewing it. But if you want to learn more about how bacteria can produce B12, which is the source of all B12, by the way, go to my YouTube channel and watch The Gut-Brain Connection and Beyond. It's a 3-part series, completely free to watch on YouTube. So you can check that out if you want to learn more information. But we don't have time to get into too much. Okay, let's go on here. Here's another potent anti-inflammatory, ginger. And I like to use ginger is also, medicinally, it's antiviral, and this is something that's been used for centuries, probably thousands of years over in Asia for its potential antiviral effects. A lot of people will use ginger for its anti-nausea effects. I'll tell you my favorite use of ginger is for a topical application for pain, and it doesn't have to be superficial pain. It can actually be like back pain, or knee pain, or any other joint pain. I'm going to tell you a little story here about my first experience with ginger. I was getting ready, and this is when my family and I used to travel in a 32-foot Winnebago motorhome. And of course, you got your kitchen sink and everything there. I got my refrigerator there. And we were getting ready to head out, and I was going to Tennessee from Alabama. So it was a short drive, maybe 6 hours. But we had to be there that day because I was presenting that evening. And I was supposed to stand up just like I am now and present on healthy living and, hey, this is what you can do. Simple things like what we talked about here. But one problem started to develop. I pulled my back right before I got into the motorhome. I don't know what I was doing. But I realized, I'm in trouble because I know what I just did. And I have a history of back pain. So I thought, what am I going to do? I just deep in thought, got the motorhome on the road. And my wife said, Ron, what are you going to do? How are you going to stand up in front of everybody like this? Health is good, you know? And I thought, oh no, what am I going to do? I never planned for this. But I stopped the RV and I ran over. Why, is there turmeric there? What is there? There was some ginger there in the refrigerator. So I got the ginger, and I prayed about it, by the way. Got the ginger, and I cut it up, and I think I shredded it up, actually. I said, wife, can you please put this on my back right here? And sure enough, she obliged me. She put it on my back. And it was a cute experience. And then we got saran wrap and wrapped it around. And so it was held there on my back. What do you think that felt like after a few minutes? Hot. It actually was soothing. And I sat back down in the driver's seat of the RV, and here I am driving. I hope this works. I hope this works. And about an hour later, that is too hot. That is too hot. I stopped the RV. I pulled that thing off. I ran to the back, and thankfully, we had a freezer there, too. This is an RV, and I grabbed an ice pack, and I stuck the ice pack on my back, and I sat back down, and I continued to drive. Oh, that feels good. Oh, that feels good. And all the while, I was also trying to do stretches as well. And all while driving, here I am. The motorhome may be swaying to and fro, but I'm going down the road. And we pull into the church. Here's the moment of test. What's going to happen? I look at my wife. I get up. It's a miracle. It's a miracle. I have no pain, none at all. And I'll tell you what, I ran into that church. I bounded up on the stage, and I proceeded to give those individuals a lecture on ginger that they will never forget. And I think everyone tried it that night because it really worked. And even to this day, if my wife injures her back, she says, Ron, can you get me a ginger poultice? Because we know it works. And there have been other people that have tried it and found tremendous benefit. So this is one remedy I have a lot of personal experience with. Keep in mind, it will get hot. But what I like to do after the hot is ice. The hot and cold is actually good. That's a little bit of a concept of hydrotherapy. We do that with water, hot and cold, and that helps to get rid of some of those inflammatory compounds as well. So nice, simple treatment with ginger. But you can take it internally. Keep in mind, whenever you take ginger internally, it says to the stomach, open up. Let the food pass through. So if your food is not fully digested, and you do that every day, then you could end up getting food allergies. So I don't recommend taking ginger internally every day. It increases gastric emptying. So ginger is one of those herbs that should be used sparingly internally, used as needed is what I would say, not every day. But it is a powerful, powerful remedy. Externally, maybe not every day either, but when you need it, it's very, very potentially beneficial. Yes, question?
I'm just curious, what makes it get hot?
That's a good question. Well, there's some compounds that trigger probably a heating sensation on the nerves. I'm not exactly sure what nerves they're affecting. But there are certain natural products that affect sensory nerves in different ways. You've heard of menthol, that will help with the pain sensation for a few days until you get sensitized to it. Cayenne will also operate on those same sensory nerves. And I'm assuming that this is going to operate on those sensory nerves somehow as well. I'm not sure the exact compounds, but they do know that compounds in ginger do block the prostaglandin production and leukotriene production as well. So I've heard a lot of people that use this for, if they're struggling with cancer, they'll use ginger, not just for nausea, but also because of the fact, especially lung cancer. Leukotrienes feed lung cancer. That's one thing that we've learned. And so if you have lung cancer and you're treating it with Tylenol for the pain, what's going to happen? Leukotrienes are shunted over to the lungs and inflammation of the tumor. And that's not a good thing because tumors like inflammation. They just grow and grow and grow. So ginger, would, in my opinion, would be a better choice for pain relief, or turmeric. Okay? All right, let's go on here. Flaxseed. It's interesting to note that even if you do have prostaglandins being produced, flaxseed, and especially in particular the omega-3 fatty acids, essential means you have to get it from your food. You can't produce these. Essential omega-3 fatty acids. Flaxseed, chia seed, also a very rich source. And I would say among the plants, flax and chia are the superfoods of omega-3. And omega-3 is found in other plants as well, but these are the superfoods of omega-3. And you don't need a whole lot of it, maybe a teaspoon, maybe a tablespoon at most. Keep in mind, it needs to be, the hull needs to be broken down to get that oil out. You can put it in a coffee grinder and grind it. It's good to grind it fresh because this oil, the omega-3 fatty acid, is very susceptible to oxidation. So the best thing to do is just make small quantities and grind it fresh and then use it. That's really the only way I'd recommend it because it can go rancid very quickly. So I would never buy flax meal at the store. It's probably rancid already. And rancid oils become inflammatory, even healthy oils, even essential oils that become rancid become a lot of times inflammatory. So keep those oils in their natural protective shells, or in the case of essential oils, keeping them in those small black bottles, away from sunlight in a cool area to prevent oxidation. Okay, oh yeah, this is the reason why I was bringing this up. Remember the prostaglandin pathway? You have the arachidonic acid, prostaglandins. These can either be inflammatory, like the prostaglandin E2, or it can be anti-inflammatory. It just depends on what's there to tell the prostaglandins what to become. Omega-3 helps to produce, let me get this right, prostaglandin E1 and E3, which are both anti-inflammatory. So even though you might have the initiation of an inflammatory response, omega-3s can deflect the blow and make it turn a bad thing into a good thing. It's pretty nice, right? Also, omega-3 fatty acids, low levels have been implicated in heart disease. And we know that cardiovascular disease is a comorbidity of COVID-19. So it's important to make sure we have adequate levels of omega-3 fatty acids. And this is a great source right here. Chia seeds also, great source. Okay, how are we doing on time? 4:38, okay. I want to do a Q&A, but let me just get through my favorite natural remedy, okay? This is worth the wait right here. Orange. I was actually with a big group of physicians and doctors nurses from all over the country. We flew out to Seattle, and we put on this big health and wellness program. It's called Mind Cure. And there was a doctor who stood up right before me, and he was making fun of natural remedies. I don't know why physicians sometimes do that. But anyway, young guy is probably about my age, and he said, you know, everyone thinks we should be giving our patients something along the lines of this. Everyone thinks we should be giving, or I don't want anyone to be thinking I'm going to be giving everyone oregano and orange juice, you know, oregano and orange juice. And I got up after him. I said, you know, I felt kind of bad because my favorite remedies are oregano and orange juice. And then I went on to explain why, and everyone was like, we need oregano and orange juice. What was that guy talking about? So, let me tell you, I'm not going to talk about oregano today. It is great. Make sure you take it the right way. But we're going to talk about oranges right now, because oranges are a superfood for fighting viruses and inflammation and cancer, okay? And not just going to say this, I'm going to show you the research. And I'm talking about oranges, other citrus, specifically, you know, the Citrus sinensis, the regular orange. You get the orange juice from, you know, the orange you see growing everywhere in Florida. By the way, they have a bacteria there now that's causing orange trees to die. Just found that out when I had COVID. I've had sympathy for the orange trees as I was sick too. But yeah. And I don't think you can grow those here. But hey, at least you can import them from somewhere. But oranges, very common. You could find that at any grocery store. Even the Piggly Wigglies down south, okay? I used to think you couldn't find anything healthy in there, but they do have produce. And there are probably some other good things too. I'm kind of hard on Piggly Wiggly because I grew up at Piggly Wiggly. The only thing I really liked at Piggly Wiggly was a slingshot my mom bought me one time, and I got in trouble with that, and that's a whole nother story. But yeah, oranges. You can get them in your local produce. But oranges, also grapefruit, also tangelos, also mandarins, also clementines, lemons, to a certain extent. I don't know how broadly we could stretch this, but a lot of citrus are going to fall under the same category. However, with this one right there, here, hesperidin, we know that it's found especially in the standard orange. So you don't have to get really fancy to get this. Now, this is amazing, absolutely amazing. And I feel bad for letting some oranges go bad in my kitchen now, because I don't really like oranges, I'll be honest with you. I'll eat them, but I'd much rather have a mango or grapes, you know, and it's okay to have preferences, but once we realize how good these things are, I think we're going to be drawn to them more. Okay, so let's talk about the orange. Okay, title says, Hesperidin and SARS-CoV-2, new light on the healthy function of citrus fruits. Now I'm going to go through here and read a few things. It says, among the flavonoids, and these are phytochemicals or plant chemicals, in this particular category, flavonoids, hesperidin has recently attracted the attention of researchers because it binds to the key proteins of the severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2, SARS-CoV-2. It binds to the coronavirus. That's pretty neat, isn't it? And we've talked about other things that could bind, but this definitively, it binds, and it's a very easy bind. They call it low binding energy. It doesn't take a lot of energy for it to come over and bind to it. It's almost like it's magnetized. It's attracted to the coronavirus. Now, what does it do once it attaches? Well, let me see here. I'll read. This is from the same study. I don't know if I have this on my slide, but I have it in my notes. No, it's not in the slide. Okay. It says, several computational methods independently applied by different researchers show that hesperidin has a low binding energy both with the coronavirus spike protein, you've heard of that one, right? And with the main protease that transforms the early proteins of the virus. Now, these are the two things that vaccines have been targeting. Oranges target them. Oranges. And I could get sidetracked here because I see the vaccine splitting apart families, you know? And I just wish that people would be educated to see that there are alternatives, and they are valid alternatives. There is a way of living that can be much more protective than any vaccine. And part of it has to do with things like this. But it's a holistic package, you know. Remember that couch potato? He could have one orange fall down, but he's still sitting on the couch. Need to get up and exercise, go outside and get vitamin D. Be more physically active. So let me read the rest of this here. Response to those proteins responsible for viral replication. So if you can somehow inhibit viral replication, what have you stopped? The reproduction of the virus, right? That's a good thing. It says the binding energy of hesperidin to these important components is lower than, now this is really important, I'll read it and I'll explain it. Lower than lopinavir, rotenavir, indinavir, suggesting that it could perform an effective antiviral action. You know what these other things are? They're prescription, either prescription or experimental medications that are antiviral. And they're used because they bind to the virus, and if something is bound to the virus, it may not be able to enter the cell or replicate. Remember the elderberry lectins we found out about? Well, this can do the same thing. And it's in the flesh of oranges. Isn't that simple? What else is in oranges? Vitamin C, we know that's helpful. Just amazing. And the simplicity of it, that is what really surprised me. Now, I know that oranges are good. I've known that oranges have been good for a while. I just found out about the hesperidin COVID-19. But I want to show you the part that I think everyone here has been neglecting about the orange. And in fact, you despise this part. You throw it away. You compost. Maybe you compost it. It's the orange peel. The orange peel. Now, who likes a good orange peel? Anyone? Excellent. Yes. All right, that's good. As I said before, I'll eat it because I know it tastes good, but I cannot say I like it at this point. But I know it's good for me. And this is the reason why. Limonene, which is a compound, and by the way, this comes from the essential oil in the orange rind. There's a lot of essential oil there. And limonene in the orange, I believe it constitutes about 90% of that essential oil. So 90% of orange essential oil is limonene. Okay, in particular, D-limonene. I'm going to read you some things about limonene, then I'm going to show you a study that I actually did. It was never published anywhere, but I'm going to show you the clinical trial, which I thought was miraculous. Okay, limonene suppresses lipopolysaccharide-induced production of nitric oxide. Lipopolysaccharide is a component of certain bacteria that is highly inflammatory. You've heard of septic shock? Well, this is the reason why people go into septic shock, is because of the lipopolysaccharides on those bacteria. So it's very irritating, very inflammatory. What suppressed it? Limonene. I'm going to show you some charts here, which are absolutely amazing. Totally amazing. Okay. There are two types of inflammation that it's looking at here. Remember the prostaglandin E2 we talked about? Oh, how'd that happen? Put the cart before the horse. Okay. So you have the prostaglandin E2, and you have something else called nitric oxide production. I think this was in macrophages, the big immune cells. So if you want to decrease nitric, we'll start with prostaglandin E2. If you want to decrease prostaglandin E2, and let's say you're having a very, very precise surgery done, posterior laminectomy, which I used to help out some in the OR. Basically, they're cutting open your spine or exposing your spine, and they're taking out, they might take out a disc or something. But that area you need to make sure that area doesn't get all inflamed and close up around your spinal cord, because then you'll be paralyzed. So what do they give in the hospital when you're going through one of these surgeries? A drug called Dex, affectionately known as Dex or dexamethasone. It's probably the most powerful steroid medication that is available. A lot of side effects, but they do give it in surgery. Now, take a look here. Okay, does it reduce prostaglandin E2 production? Does it? Yeah, this is your baseline over here. Everyone see that? Wish I had a pointer, but you know what? I'll just come over here. So this is your baseline right here. Every good study will have a control that you can compare things to. This is normal right here, normal right here. This is, okay, right here. This is the drop in inflammation from dexamethasone. Now look, this one over here actually increased the inflammation. That's not a good one to have, right? If you've got a headache. Turns out I think this is an experimental laboratory type chemical. But over here, this is what I want you to focus on. This is limonene, the effects of limonene. Now, if you asked me how much limonene you needed to use, and I told you, well, you need to get 0.01% of limonene on these cells or in these tissues, what would you say? Probably not a whole lot, right? What, are we already seeing a decrease at 0.01? Yes, we are. What about 0.02? Even more. And at 0.04%, it's stronger than the strongest steroid medication known to man. That's amazing, isn't it? Absolutely amazing. Now, let's go to this other aspect of inflammation. We see that this experimental laboratory type chemical does do a good job at decreasing inflammation in one aspect, but then it causes inflammation in another. Dexamethasone does a little bit, but look at what limonene does, especially at 0.02, does just as good pretty much as dexamethasone, but look at what happens at 0.04. Drops that inflammation. And so this is a broad spectrum anti-inflammatory. It is powerful. I think it's the most powerful anti-inflammatory that we can find, that we know of in nature. And I've studied quite a few of them. So it's interesting to note, and there's other medicinal values here that I'll talk about in just a minute, but I want specifically to address the inflammation. Cancer or tumors thrive in an inflammatory environment. They suppress the immune system outside, but inside there's inflammation. They're just trying to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. And there's massive inflammation inside that tumor. But if you can supply an anti-inflammatory effect to that tumor, you know what happens? Theoretically, you can shrink it and cause it to go away. Okay, theoretically. And I had an individual in my family, I'm not going to say who because of HIPAA, and this may or may not be my extended family. I'm not going to tell you, but just know it was someone in my family. She came to me and she said, my doctor said I'm going to have to cut part of my ear off because I have squamous cell carcinoma. And I'm really scared about this. Is there anything that I could do? And I just read about this. I thought, yes, there is something that we could try. And we'll start right away because I have some of this. I had some D-limonene because I actually make a cream with D-limonene in it. It's been very helpful for me. So I'll have this limonene on hand as well. Okay, so here's day one. This is after the first application. Everyone see this little tumor here? Okay, that's day one. Now, I'm not going to go in a day-by-day progression just for the sake of time, but I will tell you after 10 days, I skipped a day or two taking pictures, but she was very persistent in applying this, as she should. Oh, you know what? I don't have all the pictures here. But this is day one, day two, day three, day four. Oh, what happened to the tumor? It fell off, she said. Day 5, it started to scab up. Day 6 started to shrink. Day 7 started to heal over. Day 8. Now, I know I have something else here. I want to show you this because this is absolutely amazing. Where is that? Okay. This wasn't taking. It was topically applying Lemonine using, I think she just dipped a little paintbrush with, like the horsehair paintbrush, and she just painted that area. I think she painted it 7 times a day for 10 days. And I know I have this picture somewhere. Oh, I don't have it here. But anyway, I have a video. I actually documented this. After 10 days, complete healing. Complete. No scarring. It looked like baby skin underneath. So it turned a tumor into baby skin in 10 days. You know what? This person became a believer in natural remedies after that. I'll tell you that. And she broke down in tears because she realized, wow, God has placed some powerful things in these plants. And yet you think an orange peel could cure cancer? It just, it seems too simple. Well, I didn't make it. You can press the oil out of an orange peel. You could eat the orange peel and thereby press your own oil out as you chew. But what I did was I went to Amazon and I bought it. I just bought the Lemonine. So you can purchase it. A lot of places have it. But keep in mind, if you can't find Lemonine, if you find orange essential oil, it's 90% Lemonine. Grapefruit, I think, is either 86 or 96% Lemonine. And there's a couple others that are very high in Lemonine that you can use instead. I think we actually used, I did tincture a couple herbs in here that are good for collagen synthesis, like Korean ginseng. And if you contact me, and by the way, I'd like to stay in contact, go to my website, healthislife.org, fill out our Contact Us form, and ask for me to sign you up for our newsletter. That way I can get you things like this on a more regular basis. So it's healthislife.org. I did put a little bit more in this. I think I diluted it with a little bit of coconut oil. But honestly, I think the biggest help was just the Lemonine. So if you were to just use Lemonine, and I've encouraged people since that have the squam. In fact, Lemonine has been found to be effective in the laboratory setting against squamous cell carcinoma, basal cell carcinoma, and even malignant melanoma. It's just such a powerful anti-inflammatory, it just shuts the tumor down. So, and actually, I was helping another guy in Australia, and he believes he's in remission now. He had a squamous cell carcinoma in his throat, and he was really wondering what to do. And he said he prayed, and he said he heard Ron Meinhardt, so he contacted me, and he said, "Ron, I think you can help me." And so we prayed together, and I told him about what happened with my relative with the squamous cell carcinoma, and we got him on a regimen. And I contacted him the other day, and I said, "Oh, by the way, initially he went back to the doctor, and the doctor said, 'Yeah, your tumor's gone away, but you need to make sure you do your chemo now.'" He said, "Well, I'll wait a little bit longer." And last time I talked to him, he said that he's expecting full recovery. So, and I can't guarantee that's going to happen, with every case, but a lot of times we just underestimate the value of these natural things. There's so much potential there for healing. It's absolutely amazing. Okay, so I think I have a couple more things to share, and then we'll do our Q&A. Yeah, one last thing here. Okay. This comes from that same study looking at D-limonene. And what it found was that D-limonene also helped with the reduction of tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin-1 beta, and interleukin-6. All of these can be associated with cytokine storm right here. All of these. Now, I'm not going to tell you to go home and drink D-limonene, but I will say this, that if you want to target the lungs with limonene, all you have to do is run a vaporizer with orange essential oil or grapefruit essential oil in the reservoir. And you can, now they have these little diffusers, that you put a few drops in, and I think you need a bigger treatment than that, okay? What I use is I'll go and get the steam mist humidifiers that have the vapor reservoir. The Vicks used to make them. Yeah. The VapoSteam, you were supposed to put their VapoSteam, and I never used that. I would only use essential oils. But, by the way, you can put pine essential oil in that reservoir too. It's multifunction. But if you wanted to target inflammation in the lungs, and it has to be fresh orange oil, because remember, the oxidized orange oil can be an irritant. So don't go rummaging in your medicine cabinet and say, here's that orange oil from 15 years ago. It's not going to help. Don't use that. Get some fresh essential oil, orange essential oil. But anyway, you put that in the vapor reservoir, and you just let that steam. It'll pick up that whole, you can put an ounce of essential oil in there, and it will pick it up and put it in your room. And you know what? You breathe it in. It bypasses, whenever you breathe anything in, it bypasses the traditional routes of metabolism, like with taking internally. And so you can get a much more effective dose, not only to the lungs, but even into the circulation. So you're having just an amazing anti-inflammatory breathing treatment, basically. And what I do is, if we realize we're getting sick or something, I'll run pine oil in that vapor reservoir. And by the way, don't put it in the water and then put the lid back on, and it's not going to work very well. You want to put it in the vapor reservoir itself. There's a little indentation there for that, just for that purpose. So you leave the water there, maybe a pinch of salt in there, and then you put the essential oil in the vapor reservoir. And I like to use up to an ounce because it'll fit in there, and it will go out into the room air. Also, by the way, tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin-1 beta, interleukin-6. Remember, we talked about this. One of the maladaptive sickness responses that comes when we have just these chronic illnesses, such as, chronic conditions, I should say, such as obesity. Remember? What happens? Tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin-1/6, interleukin-1. What does this lead to? Maladaptive sickness syndrome leading to depression. I'll tell you what, I've never seen a better remedy for depression than limonene. It is amazing. I had a friend that contacted me and said, my husband, I don't know what to do with him. He's depressed, and I've never seen him like this. What can I do? And I listed a few things. And by the way, it has to be a holistic approach. It's not just the limonene. And that's what I gave her. I gave her a whole bunch of parameters. Have him start exercising, help increase the quality of his sleep. And by the way, limonene helps with that too. It's a adenosine agonist. So it helps your body bind adenosine, which is sleep inducing. I've never had a better night's sleep. Well, I have, but I've had very good night's sleep sometimes when I'll take some, I don't want to recommend that. Just run the vaporizer, okay, with the limonene. Taking essential oils internally is very controversial, by the way. And I would encourage you to do your due diligence and make the decision for yourself. For myself, I will take a little bit of orange essential oil because I can eat the orange peel. So I figure, why can't I eat a little bit of the essential oil when it's properly diluted in a food, a fresh squeezed orange juice or something like that. That's what I recommended to this man who was suffering from depression. I think I told him 6 drops of orange essential oil in a freshly squeezed glass of orange juice, cup of orange juice. And I contacted them maybe a week later, and they're like, oh yeah, he's back to normal. No depression, and it hasn't come back since. So a lot of times we have depression because of overactive immune response, or it could be sleep issues. And sleep issues, believe it or not, I have a video on YouTube called 7 Steps for a Good Night's Sleep. But believe it or not, sleep is so vitally important to the recovery of the brain that if we start missing out, especially on the delta wave sleep, the slow wave sleep that we get early on during the night, that we should get early on during the night, then we will start to develop, we'll have much greater risk of mental disorders, even dementia, because the brain cannot regenerate. When we have that early to bed, early to rise type of system, it is good for the brain. It's good to ward off depression. But maybe you need a catalyst in there. And perhaps the catalyst could be something as simple as this orange essential oil in a vaporizer running at night. And potentially, as I've seen before, could potentially help with other issues, depressive symptoms and that kind of thing. Just an amazing compound. And that's one thing that I've noticed about natural remedies, is that they don't just target one thing and then give you side effects over here that you've got to deal with. You know, that's one thing that I really became discouraged with working in the hospital, where we'd have to treat the patient and then we'd also have to treat the side effects. And I really appreciate the fact that most, if not all, natural remedies, and I'm not saying poison ivy, you know, poisonous things, leave those alone. Because the concept of temperance, the biblical concept of temperance, is moderate use of that which is good, right? And abstinence of those things that are harmful. Okay? So moderately using those things that are good, there are very few side effects. And if they do have side effects, then maybe it's a good thing, like the garlic, you know? Or maybe it's a good thing, like the orange oil. Depression, antidepressive, helps with sleep, maybe mitigates cancer issues, all kind of things. Just amazing. And I believe God has placed these things. I know that this could not have happened by accident, that these things work so harmoniously with our system. It's just absolutely amazing. And I want to encourage each and every one of you to look more into to natural remedies, essential oils. I didn't get a chance to talk about hydrotherapy. That'll have to be on another date, unless someone asks me a question on that when we do our Q&A. But there's so much to learn, and I feel like I've only opened the can of worms with natural remedies. There's so much to learn, and those are healthy vegan gummy worms, by the way, not bad worms. And even that, you know, maybe temperance would disqualify that as well. But I want to paint a good picture, okay? Because natural remedies, embarking on the study of natural remedies is an amazing thing. And you can help a lot of people. You know how I learned about natural remedies? It wasn't at nursing school. I didn't know the first thing. The only thing I learned about natural remedies is you shouldn't let your patient take them. That was all I learned. So there's a lot to learn, but the best way to learn, I think, is to start using them yourself. And when you realize the benefit, then you can help others with them as well. And it's just an amazing thing. I went through a really serious time with my back. I had a chronic autoimmune disorder that was affecting my spine. I can remember it got so bad that I was teaching at post-secondary level at the time. I took a group of students to Jamaica because they were going to help Jamaicans get healthy. Go figure. They're probably healthier than we were out there in the sunshine eating all those mangoes. And it was mango season, by the way, so we really enjoyed that. But I was there, and I was in such pain. I worked with the doctors there. I tried, what's wrong with me? And it's so frustrating when you're trying to figure out what the root cause is, and no one seems to know. And you're struggling with chronic pain and this chronic condition that sometimes you just despair. And I remember I was sitting down on the ground, and this was when I had 2 children. My youngest daughter was just learning to walk at the time, and one of my students had my daughter's hands, and they were walking with her. And I remember sitting down on the ground, just in pain, thinking, I wish that I could do that, but I can't get up. I'm in too much pain. And I didn't tell anyone. I just suffered through it. It's my late 30s. This shouldn't be happening to me. So what I did was, of course, I prayed about it, but I started learning about these natural things. But I didn't find anything that worked. And finally, I can remember my work was very close to where we lived. We actually could walk back to our house from my job. Well, my family met me up in my office, and here I am pushing the stroller. We go down the hill, and this is a really steep incline going back up the hill to our house. And I start pushing, my back starts hurting. And then my legs start to get numb and tingly, and it just this terrible sensation. And I gather all of the willpower that I have. And I say, I am not going to let this defeat me. I am going to push this stroller up the hill. If it kills me, I'm going to push it up. And I ran up the hill with that stroller, even through the pain. And you know what? When I got to the top of the hill, you know what happened? That was the apex or the pinnacle of my condition. From there, it was all downhill. I started learning. It wasn't the exercise per se. It was the mindset that I was not going to be defeated. And it was like one thing after another, learning about this natural remedy here, this natural remedy here. And I can stand here today and tell you, I'm in remission. I don't have to worry about it anymore. Now, if I'm not careful with my lifestyle, I'll start to feel something again in my back. But I know what I need to do. And it's that whole approach, the whole system approach, not just a natural remedy. First I thought, it's just the natural remedy that's going to help me, but they weren't helping. But when we commit everything to that process of restoration, and we trust that God is able to do it, and we cooperate with Him, I'll tell you, miracles can happen, because I'm living proof of that. And I've never since looked at one of my children and said, I'm sorry, I can't walk with you. Actually, I teach them to run now. We ran our first 5K together a couple years ago. So I praise the Lord for that. And I believe that it's not isolated to me. It doesn't have to just be my story. It can be our story. And I want it to be our story and I want it to be your neighbor's story. And actually, I want it to be your enemy's story as well. Because this is wellness worth sharing. Wellness worth sharing. And that concludes the presentation for today. I want to thank you all again for coming out. And I promise you I'd do Q&A. If you feel like you need to leave, you can. We're going to limit the Q&A, I think, to 20 minutes, if that's okay. 20 minutes, no more than 20 minutes. But let's go ahead. So if you have a question, feel free. One right here.
What's your take on hemp for pain and bees?
Okay, that's a great question. I'm so glad that you asked. Well, we would call it CBD oil. Some people would even go a step further and take the whole plant version, which is medical marijuana. What I think about hemp. And I'll just tell you my opinion, and you have a right to yours. I totally believe that. My opinion is, I spent too many nights in college experimenting with that plant that I don't even want to think about it. So I know what it did to me. So the medicinal marijuana part, there's so many other natural remedies that are beneficial without the potential psychoactive effects. And the worst for me was the amotivational syndrome. That's a documented, and that will happen with medical marijuana. The thing is, you feel good, and you feel abnormally good, and you feel like, I don't need to do anything else in this life. I just feel satisfied. And for me, it took all the drive out of my life. And I don't want to go back there. That was a very dark place for me. And I think a lot of people are they're looking for pain relief. And they're getting involved in it, and I hope that's not happening. I don't know, I haven't looked at the research, but I hope the amotivational syndrome is not happening, but I think it is, because that usually comes with any type of marijuana usage. However, let's go back to the refined version that doesn't have the heavy amounts of the THC, which would be like the CBD oil and even the hemp seeds, okay? Because I want to talk about this. There is a culture that is built around marijuana. It's called the marijuana culture. If you grew up in the 60s, you know what I'm talking about, right? And even in the 80s, we would wear these hemp, the hemp bracelets, hemp necklaces, they were very popular. Well, that just comes from maybe a type of a marijuana plant. It may be the actual marijuana plant, I'm not sure. But it was that culture that was popularized. And I'll tell you the truth. Hemp seeds, they taste pretty good, don't they? But hemp seeds are high in omega-6 and not as high in omega-3. They're actually kind of like a run-of-the-mill seed. They're not a superfood. So if someone tells you hemp seeds are superfood, they're not superfood. They are food, potentially, but they're not superfood. If you really want to get a seed that has a lot of omega-3s and less omega-6, which could be inflammatory, the chia and the flax are without a peer. That's the seed of choice. If you want to eat hemp seeds, they taste good, but they're not a superfood. Okay, so that's hemp seed. CBD oil. If you study the chemical compounds in CBD oil, you know what one of them is? Limonene. There are plenty of other plants that are highly anti-inflammatory. You don't just need to go to CBD oil to get anti-inflammatory action. Many essential oils, not just essential. See, CBD oil is actually essential oil of marijuana. And for me, I'd rather stay, my personal experience with it, I've seen how it destroys lives. And I don't want to support that industry. I'll tell you, over in Oklahoma right now, we have greenhouses popping up all over especially our county. And I'll tell you, you know who's coming in to run those greenhouses? And I'm not saying this because I want to target any demographic group, but I talked to a banker who lives next to me. She said, Ron, it's surprising because Iranians and Chinese are coming over and they're putting up these greenhouses to sell Oklahomans marijuana, medical marijuana. And I'm just thinking, something's not right here. Something's not right here. And I have some forebodings about this whole industry just because of my own personal experience with it. But I will say the CBD oil, it's not going to be as bad, I think, in terms of the effects of the whole plant, but it's still extracted from the plant. What if I told you, and let's get away from marijuana culture, okay? What if I told you I would like to sell you, when we leave tonight, some cocaine essential oil? It's got some D-limonene in it and a few other things. How many of you would like to buy some? It's good for pain. Okay, I saw a hand back there. Trust me, there are better sources of limonene than CBD oil or cocaine. I don't even know if it's in cocaine oil. There are so many essential oils on the market, and there are just so many choices. I don't see why I need to go to the CBD oil to get it and to possibly support an industry that I have an ethical dilemma over supporting, And I think that in some ways, CBD oil can be a gateway to medical marijuana use as well, because we start to appreciate the benefits, and then we say, well, if this works, I want to do that. And medical marijuana is becoming so easy to get. Have you noticed that? I was in Las Vegas a few years ago, and this was just when they legalized marijuana. And honestly, if I'm not going to condemn people because they choose to use it. I don't think it's temperate to use, but that's something you need to pray about. But I'll tell you what happened. When they legalized marijuana in Las Vegas, the motor vehicle accident rate increased dramatically. And they realized that they couldn't do breathalyzer tests on people that were using medical marijuana, unlike, driving intoxicated. I don't know if they have a system of doing that now, but it got really bad for a while. In fact, I was standing outside. We were having a big health seminar close to the Strip in Las Vegas, and I was holding a sign, and all of a sudden this car comes and just rams into another car almost right in front of me. And you know what was right next to us? A dispensary. I don't know if he was on his way to go there, but I'll tell you, so many people were walking back and forth with those bags of medical marijuana. We would go out and we would grab people, come to our health seminar. We're going to show you a better way. And I can remember one guy, he came and he set his medical marijuana bag down on our registration desk, and he forgot it there. And go back and get that. We don't need that. But I'll tell you, there's a better way. There really is. There's a better way. And God has placed plants in the world that are non-toxic, that are, and Jamie, there's a verse that you've quoted recently. What is that?
The blessing of the Lord.
Yeah, tell us all that verse.
The blessing of the Lord maketh rich, and addeth no sorrow with it.
The blessing of the Lord maketh rich, and addeth no sorrow with it. You see, God wants to bless us without negative side effects. Okay? This is my philosophy of health, and I believe that if we're diligent, we can make that our reality of health. Okay? And so I'll leave it at that. I'll just tell you, do your due diligence and pray about it. But I'll still love you, still love you. But it is your decision ultimately. Yes, question.
Doesn't the marijuana plant fall under the herb plant?
Well, it does, but so does poison ivy, and so does cocaine. And there are herbs that you definitely don't want to put in your body. And that's why I said we have to be able to differentiate between herbs that have toxic effects, And I know no one here will want poison ivy essential oil, right? Because we know that's not going to be helpful. But there are varying degrees. There's some herbs, like, I told you about the water hemlock. You don't even want to touch that. If that comes in contact with broken skin, people have died because they have plucked it up out of the water. So there are some herbs that are definitely dangerous, there are some that are moderately dangerous, and there are some that are not dangerous. I like to stay on the side of the not dangerous, because you're going to have less side effects from it. There are some modern pharmaceuticals that are derived from the toxic plants. And I'm not going to go into those. That's opening up a whole can of worms. But suffice it to say, there are other alternatives many times, as you've seen today, that don't have these same side effects, but are very, very, potentially very helpful with promoting health, recovery from disease, when following a healthy lifestyle. Okay, next question.
I know by personal experience, because I've used that, because I've exhausted every other avenue I have. That most of the people that are using medical marijuana would just drop it like that.
Wow.
If they could find what you're talking about.
And that's the key.
They never would have went to that to begin with.
And that's the key. And that's the key. I don't blame those people, because you got to find something to help, I don't.
My skin is being peeled off.
Yeah, I don't blame you at all. But what I do want to do is show you what I think is a better way and alternatives.
Absolutely.
So
This is wonderful. Yeah.
praise the Lord.
Absolutely.
Next question.
If a person is already doing taking chemo, supposedly a low dose, what would that limiting, would that interfere with anything?
I'm not sure what I would do, because there are varying types of chemo also. I would talk to your oncologist, to the cancer doctor, and I would ask that, and bring them some research. If you want research on Limonene, I've got a lot of it. I can send it to you. And I would approach the oncologist with this and say, can you look at this and tell me if this would be compatible, complementary to what I'm doing right now? There are some people who have decided they're just going to do the natural. And like my relative, I mean, that was a miracle. So I do think there is potential in nature also for recovery from cancer. But a lot of oncologists are not trained that way. So it may be good to find one that would listen to you also. That's the sad thing. It used to be that we valued a person that would listen to us, And that's become in short supply in this day and age. So find someone that will listen to you. That's so important, because you have a voice. You are the patient. You have a voice. Any other questions? Here? Any other? Yes.
I have a question.
Sure.
Because before we ever see you again, we may all get mandated to take a vaccine. Can you give us any advice on what we can do if we're for some reason, someday, we have to take the vaccine? And I myself, I would take charcoal, lemon, garlic, and ginger.
Yes.
Can you give us an answer?
Okay. Yeah, and that would be an excellent series of remedies, but you would not catch all of it with those remedies. Lemon is an excellent anti-venom or anti-toxic protein compound, but the mRNA vaccine is covered with a nano emulsion of nanoparticle emulsion, lipid nanoparticle emulsion, which could get away from lemon. It actually evades the immune system even. So you may help it somewhat, but I have very real concerns, especially about mandating people to take the vaccine. I think that everyone should be able to make their own informed decision. And as a former clinical nurse, I feel like it's a violation of informed consent that people are not being told what these vaccines contain and what they are doing in the body. So I took it upon myself to research. And if you want to take a few moments, we can look at this. Okay. The first thing I'd like to discuss is where the vaccine actually goes. Because when I first heard about this, it was said the vaccine stays where? In the arm. It stays in the arm. It stays in the arm. And I thought, that doesn't make sense based on what I've previously researched. So let me go to the research. And sure enough, I found out something different. Here's a study. It's published in 2021. It says while mRNA mainly transfects cells near the injection site, it could hypothetically reach any cell in the body.
Right.
Does that look like it stays in the arm?
Not at all.
No. I don't understand this. Another study here, published in 2000, this might be the same study. I do have a few studies to cite here. Intramuscular injections of the lipid nanoparticle mRNA, which is what like the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine are, yielded expression at the injection site. So you could say most stays in the arm, right? That's a true statement. 68%, but 12% went to the liver, 11% went to the kidneys, and they don't even tell you where the rest went. Would you like to know? The Japanese government, before they signed on to allow this mRNA vaccine to be given in their population, they asked the question to Pfizer, we want to know where this goes. And you'll see why in just a moment. And so Pfizer said, okay, we'll show you where it goes. Here's a study. And this is looking at organ distribution. So the injection site, this is the arm, the deltoid, or this might have been, this was in rats. actually. So one of the other muscles there in the rat. But see where it went? It was rapidly absorbed in cells in the injection site, yes, and started to decrease over time. But look at this down here. What do you see happening to this graph? Do you see this? It's starting to increase. That shows there is systemic spread. And you would think that as this stays there and it starts to decrease, it's going to be also going to other parts of the body, right? Now, if I just take away this graph on top, we can see exactly where that is. And this is what was shocking for me. We find that it does go to the, let's see, the liver. See the liver right here? It goes, quite a bit of it can still go to the liver. It goes to the spleen, second. It goes to this other blue, that is the whole blood. It's still, hey, it's still in the blood here after 48 hours, so where is this going to go? We don't even know where that's going to go. Actually, I know where it's going to go, and you'll know where it's going to go in just a moment. Now this one over here, the heart, heard of myocarditis? Okay, goes to the heart. Now, no, I'm sorry. That wasn't the heart. I'm mistaken. It should have been the heart. The heart is down here. You know where it is? Ovaries. Why? And I was thinking, that doesn't make sense. I can understand why I would go to these organs and stay in the blood and go to the heart and those kind of things. Why is it going to the ovaries in such an inordinate proportion? The ovaries are small. They're like the size of olives. And they're tucked away. They're not sites of huge blood profusion. What's going on here? And so I did a little bit of research. And what I found was shocking. Completely shocking. Do I have this here? I hope so. Yes, right here. Put that thought on pause, and we'll talk about the lipid nanoparticle. This is the container that holds the mRNA, okay? The lipid nanoparticle. Let me read you this study. Within this study, a potential toxicity risk of all, now, did it say some? All nanoscale drug delivery systems was found. So let me just break this down in layman's terms, just so everyone here understands. These researchers are concluding that they found a risk for toxic accumulation of all lipid nanoparticle carrier delivery systems. Does Pfizer and Moderna fit into that? All? Yes, they do. Okay? Now, this was back in 2012, before their vaccine, okay? But keep this in mind. An accumulation of several structurally different nanocarriers, but not of soluble polymers or plastics, which is not in this case, was detected in rodent ovaries after intravenous administration. What was it that caused this toxic accumulation? Well, studies in different mouse species and Wistar rats, large rodents, were conducted in a high local accumulation of nanoparticles, nanocapsules, nanoemulsions in specific locations. Now, I don't even know what these specific locations are of the ovaries. That could be very dangerous, because what is housed in the ovaries? Ovum. What is the ovum? It is the reproductive cell of the female body. Okay? In specific locations of the ovaries were found in all of these rodents, every single one of them that were given these things. Now, this is their conclusion right here. The findings of this study emphasize the role of early and comprehensive. You know what comprehensive means? Long-term. In vivo, this means in the body. Okay, not in test tubes, not in rats. It's already been established as in rats. We need to understand how this works in people. Long-term, in pharmaceutical research. Did they do this with the coronavirus vaccine, the mRNA vaccines? No. They didn't do long-term clinical safety trials. It was very rushed, you could say. So this is the reason why you have such an inordinate accumulation in the ovaries, because nanoparticle encased drug delivery systems, based on that research, tend to accumulate in the ovaries. Now, here's the frightening aspect. There's a trend over here, isn't there? You see this? It's growing, it's growing, it's growing. Okay, this is, this might be adrenal glands right here. I can't remember, but one of these is whole blood. There's still some of this that's diffusing around in the system. And my hypothesis is, if Pfizer had conducted this more, they would have seen this rise up here after another day. And maybe even up here after another day. And that is dangerous, because we have no idea what that would do to female reproduction capacity. And what if it says specific or regions of the ovaries are targeted? What if it's the ovum themselves? We know that there's a magnetic drawing force to ovums with the male gamete, right? It knows how to find this ovary. Do you understand that, what I'm saying? It's like finding a needle in a haystack. But this thing, swimming along, a little tadpole, can swim along and it can embed itself into that microscopic thing. Why? Because it's magnetically drawn there somehow. And so are these nanoparticles. I wouldn't be surprised if it's the ovum themselves that are bearing the brunt of this. And I don't have proof of that, but I have a serious question. And no long-term studies have been done. And that's despicable. That is despicable. And to force this, to mandate this, is unconscionable. It's unconscionable. Yes?
We have heard that they were using this drug also for sterilization, to take and get rid of, all these new babies and stuff, and all these women who are pregnant, so they abort.
And I've heard those things too.
That now confirms it.
Well, I've heard those things, and I can't completely verify, but what I can say is this. This poses some serious questions. And we haven't even gotten to what happens yet in the cell. We need to get there in just a second with this mRNA. The lipid nanoparticle themselves are highly inflammatory, but wait until you see what happens.
Or even 1 year from now.
We don't know. We don't know. Mm-hmm.
Once you've got it in your body, it's there.
Yes, question.
Along the way this is going, why are they giving boosters on top of this?
I don't know. I can't answer that question. If I was in charge, everyone would be eating oranges and doing jumping jacks. Okay? It's true.
They're injecting this. Could this, whatever this is, could this want to get out of the body?
It does go out of the body. It does.
Is the grievous boil that's coming? The plague that the Father's going to put on the earth?
Let me tell you something more about this, because your question brought up one more thing that everyone needs to know about. These lipid nanoparticles, they're destroyed eventually, oxidized or somehow metabolized, but you do excrete a large amount of them through the urine, through the feces, and where does that go?
On the toilet.
Yeah. It affects bacteria. Bacteria are being transfected by an mRNA virus. They're producing spike protein now. Who knows where that's going to lead to? We have no idea. Plants might be transfected by it. They might start producing spike protein. Who knows what's going to happen? This is This is like Pandora's box, you know? Humans tinkering with something they just found out about recently. It's kind of like I give my son a screwdriver and he goes and works on my engine, you know? Well, he knows just enough to think he knows what he's doing, and yet he ends up causing problems. And that's where we are with this kind of thing, I believe. We're going to end up, God knows how to handle this stuff. Much better, infinitely better than man. And we're tinkering with things that could be completely devastating to humanity. And then the worst thing is we're forcing people to try to see things a different way than we consciously believe. You know, we're convicted in our hearts. It's a terrible thing. Yes?
There's a young girl at work, she literally got, before she got the COVID shot, she said, it's okay for having a baby. 30 days, about 30, 40 days after that, she lost the baby.
Yeah.
COVID shot.
Yeah. Well, you know, also, even in women that are not pregnant, they're having strange, unaccountable menstrual changes. And I believe it's because of the attack on the ovaries. That's what I believe. And it makes sense. And let me show you this. This is the second part of this. Let's see. Okay. Lipid nanoparticles. Now, we talked about MHC. Remember that? Everyone remember MHC? In the beginning, yes. It's that compound, the protein that's produced when a virus, well, it's produced for other purposes too, but let's say when a virus infects a cell, it produces the MHC on the exterior cell, and then the T cell can come and kill it, right? That's a good thing when you have viral infected cells. It takes care of that. But understand this. This is what happens upon mRNA transfection. It's kind of like an infection with the vaccine. The resulting translated protein could be presented on MHC1 in the form of peptides or proteins, or displayed as a whole protein in the cell membrane. In both cases, cell with the vaccine peptide protein, now this is really important to understand this, on their surfaces could be targeted and killed by the cells of the adaptive and innate immune system. We're turning our immune system against innocent cells that hypothetically could be anywhere in the body. We could be killing neurons. We could be killing ovum. We could be killing zygotes. A woman could not even know she's pregnant, and yet she gets the vaccine. It could destroy that pregnancy. We have something called MHC mismatch that could occur. There's all types of scenarios. I actually wrote an article on my healthislife.org website, and I just listed all the different things that could happen that we don't know. There's no evidence of whether it could, or there is evidence that it could, or whether or not it would actually happen. So there's so many unanswered questions, not just why does it go to the ovaries, or what does it do to the ovaries? There's so many. And yet we have these other things that oranges, those don't go to the ovaries. You know, if they do something helpful. You know, we have all these things, and it's, I can't believe it, honestly. As someone who loves prevention and wellness and natural remedies and sees the benefit and the value, I see millions of people unnecessarily suffering and dying because I don't know why. It could be bigotry. It could be ignorance. It could be prejudice. I don't know what it is. But one thing for sure is that there is an alternative. Yes, question.
They have a question.
Yes, that's good.
I was wondering if the vaccines are all the same. We have the Johnson & Johnson, and you don't hear much about that.
That is a different vaccine. That's a vector-based vaccine. It does not transfect the cells, so these things that I just showed would not pertain to that. However, I have a moral issue with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine because it was, along with a lot of other vaccines, it was created using cell lines from an aborted baby that was kept alive while the cells were extracted, tortured.
when they took them out.
Exactly. And I have a moral issue with that. I know some people don't know, for him to know it, that know it to do good and do it to not, it is sin. You didn't know, but if you know these things and you have a moral objection against abortion, I don't care who in your church says it's okay. God said, do not murder. And I have a higher obligation and higher power that I answer to. And I think that each and every one of us has that. So any of these vaccines, they should all be voluntary. There should be no mandatory vaccination unless the vaccination includes taking a deep breath of air, going to sleep, at a good time. And even that, I hate to force that on someone. They still have a right to stay up all night, except for my child. My child, I will mandate that until they leave my house. But does force produce oxytocin? No. Remember, oxytocin resolves all these issues relating to COVID-19? Remember that? Love is not force. Love woos, it entreats, it educates. And it used to be that we believed that people should be educated in this country rather than forced. Thomas Jefferson, famous quote, if we do not appreciate, I'm butchering this quote, if we do not appreciate what someone is doing in this country, we should educate their indiscretion, not take their liberty from them. That's what we have to do. That is the spirit of freedom. And if you take away the spirit of freedom, you have given that person a worse disease than COVID-19. The spirit of bondage. And that does a lot more, well, maybe not immediately, but in the long run, it destroys humanity. And that's not God's plan. And honestly, I'm going to be honest with you. If you have studied the vaccine and you decide you want to go get it, I will still love you. You know that? And I respect your decision. I just wish that it was reciprocal. And some people it is. But in some people it isn't. And it goes on the other side too, because some people, they don't respect other people's choice to take the vaccine. However, I do think it's important to share your concerns. But beyond that, love that person. Go give them a hug. They need it. Love them. Because when we love, we have a much better opportunity of helping someone to empathize with us, to see what we see. It breaks down barriers. I was recently chatting with someone who was very adamant that people should be forced to take the vaccine. This was on YouTube where, the veil goes off and the bad words come out, unfortunately. Not of mine or hers, but she was very vocal. And I started asking her a few questions. I prayed, Lord, please help me not to get upset. Help me to help this person just to see this, just to see these things, just to see that human beings should be treated as human beings, as people that do have their own free will, they're free moral agents. And you know what? The conversation progressed, and it got better and better. And in the end, she said, thank you so much. This has made my day. It's refreshing to see how people can come together and discuss things. And I learned so much. And I said, thank you. I enjoyed it too. And people logged on. I still get notifications on Facebook. People logged on and they saw that conversation, said, that's amazing. That's what we need. We need an open, loving dialogue. And by the way, that's wellness worth sharing also. It's not just how we share the wellness, it's the way in which we do it as well that will make the greatest benefit. When we share the truth in love, I don't think there's any stopping it. I interviewed Ron Paul and I'm not making a political statement here, interviewed Ron Paul a few years ago on the subject of liberty, just liberty. And he started talking about medicine because he's a doctor. And he said, Ron, something's going on with this system. There's force, there's kind of tyranny that's coming into it, but there's also a people that is becoming aware of something better. And he's a medical doctor telling me this. And he said, Ron, they're going to try to stop it, but they can't stop this movement. They can't stop it. The movement of liberty in healthcare, of freedom of choice in healthcare. And I'll tell you right now, we're up against some big obstacles. But your strength is in the Lord.
Amen.
Your strength is in the Lord. You may think you're small in numbers. You may think you might not have all the scientific reasoning. Well, you have some of it, right?
Yeah.
But the Lord is mighty to save all those who call upon him in faith. And whether it be at the threat of losing your job, whether it be at the threat of alienating friends, whether it be at the threat of even causing division in the household, put your trust in the Lord. Put your trust in the Lord, because ultimately, if we do what is right, we stand up for what is right, though the heavens fall, which is what we're called to do in this day and age. If we stand up for what is right, God will be with us. He said, I will be with you always, even until the end of the world. That includes right now as well. So we have that blessed promise, that blessed hope. Don't lose courage. And I'll tell you what, I've been comforted and strengthened by just talking about this. And I've been censored. I can't even post anything to YouTube now without the threat of them taking my entire channel down. And that's a travesty, because I'm just trying to help people, you know. There is Rumble, though, and these other things, but everyone still goes on YouTube. I still do it too. But the Lord has something better. His kingdom is so much better than this world, you know. But we can be living representatives of that kingdom right now. And though chaos, though coercion, though every other ill thing might be going on around us, we can be completely at ease when we're following in Christ's footsteps. Completely. He said, be of good cheer. In this world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer, because I have overcome the world. Overcome them. And that includes the coronavirus pandemic. He's overcome it already. Let's walk with him in faith. Don't lose courage. And if you go through some trying times, which I think we do have some in store, don't lose heart. Keep looking unto Jesus, and he will see you through. That is the ultimate wellness worth sharing. Can we pray? Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, we thank you so much for your goodness and your grace. And Lord, we know that above all things, we've talked about some amazing natural remedies, but above all, the greatest remedy that this world needs is your Spirit. We pray that we would be living examples of this, that we would go out and reach those who are in need, those who need love, who need to see love, who need to learn about these simple truths. But above all, Lord, I pray that we would know you even greater because of the greater amount of trials that we're going through. Help us to be drawn closer to you and to be able to resist, not simply in our own strength, because we have no strength on our own, but in the power and the might of Jesus Christ our Lord. Please give us this victory today, tomorrow, until the very end, and help us to truly go out and to not only live these truths, but to share them to those in need. And we pray you would roll back the tide of darkness, that we might have opportunity to spread the glad tidings of the gospel to an entire world that is enshrouded in darkness and the very characteristics of the archenemy. We thank you, Lord, and we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.